Blood dripped from broken champagne flutes while Luca Devereaux stood over three men begging for mercy they would never receive. The East Coast Mafia kingpin ruled harbor smuggling routes with absolute brutality, a man who buried enemies beneath concrete and silence. Yet tonight, standing inside his private lounge surrounded by fear and violence, Luca faced something more dangerous than any rival syndicate. A trembling schoolteacher in a navy dress offering him her grandmother's ring to pretend he loved her for 4 hours. Evelyn Hart had been abandoned at the altar that morning. Now she wanted revenge dressed as redemption. What she didn't know was that agreeing to help her would unravel everything Luca spent a decade building, including the walls around the darkness he called a heart. If you want to see how a broken teacher became a queen and a monster learned to feel again, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Tuban. Rain attacked the streets like punishment while Evelyn Hart stood outside Obsidian Lounge, trembling so hard her teeth chattered. Not from cold, from terror. The velvet ring box in her coat pocket felt heavier than her grandmother's casket had 6 months ago, and just as final. She had rehearsed this 70 times in her head during the taxi ride downtown. 70 versions of walking through those glass doors and begging the most dangerous man in the city for help. Not one version ended without humiliation. But humiliation was already done. Preston Calloway made sure of that. Her ex-fiancé. Correction, the man who left her standing alone in a wedding dress 4 hours ago while 300 guests watched in horrified silence had moved on spectacularly fast. His new girlfriend was Senator Whitmore's daughter. Beautiful. Connected, everything Evelyn would never be. And tomorrow night, Preston was throwing an engagement party at the Belmont estate to celebrate his upgrade. Evelyn's hands curled into fists inside her coat pockets. The rain soaked through her dress, through her skin, straight down into bones that felt like they might snap from shame. She had two choices. Disappear quietly, like Preston expected. Or walk into that party with someone so dangerous, so impossibly powerful, that every person who pitied her today would choke on their own shock. She chose violence. Well, the appearance of violence. Because Luca Devereaux didn't just look dangerous, he was the living embodiment of every nightmare parents warned their daughters about. Mafia kingpin, harbor smuggling lord, a man who controlled half the illegal trade moving through the East Coast with nothing but cold calculation and a reputation for brutality that made grown men weep. Evelyn had seen his picture once in a newspaper article about organized crime investigations that went nowhere. Dark eyes, sharp jaw, the kind of face that belonged on warning posters, not magazine covers. But what stayed with her wasn't his looks. It was the way he smiled in that photograph. Like he knew exactly how much power he held and found the whole world amusing because of it. A gust of wind shoved her forward. She grabbed the door handle before courage could abandon her completely. The glass felt ice-cold beneath her palm. For 3 seconds, she stood frozen between running away and ruining her life in a completely different direction. Then she pulled the door open and stepped inside. Heat hit her first, then music. Slow jazz that felt expensive and wrong for a place rumors claimed doubled as a front for arms dealing. The lounge stretched long and dark, all black leather booths and dim amber lighting that made shadows look like they had weight. 6 men in tailored suits turned to stare at her. Not one of them smiled. Evelyn's stomach dropped straight through the floor. She didn't belong here. Everything about her screamed elementary school teacher who bought cardigans on sale and spent Friday nights grading spelling tests. Her navy dress was soaked. Her hair hung in wet tangles. She looked exactly like what she was. Desperate. A man built like a concrete wall stepped into her path. Lost? His voice was flat, bored. But his hand rested near his hip where Evelyn was absolutely certain a gun lived. I need to speak with Luca Devereaux. The man's expression didn't change. He's busy. I'll wait. He doesn't take walk-ins, sweetheart, especially not... His eyes dragged over her soaked dress and shaking hands. Whatever this is. Humiliation burned through her chest. Of course this was stupid. What was she thinking? That a mafia boss would drop everything to help a nobody schoolteacher get petty revenge on an ex-fiancé? That desperation somehow bought her a seat at tables built for people who made the world bend? She turned to leave. Let her through, Dante. The voice came from the back of the lounge, smooth and cold as winter rivers. Every man in the room straightened slightly, like soldiers hearing a general's footsteps. Evelyn turned back slowly. Luca Devereaux sat in the furthest booth beneath a single overhead light that made him look like something carved from shadow and expensive menace. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than her annual salary. No tie. His collar hung open just enough to suggest he didn't follow anyone's rules, including his own. Dark eyes watched her with the kind of focus that made prey animals freeze before running. He didn't smile. He didn't move. He just waited. Dante stepped aside reluctantly. Evelyn forced her legs to carry her forward even though every instinct screamed to run. Her shoes squelched with each step. Water dripped from her coat onto floors so polished they reflected the ceiling lights. She stopped 3 feet from his table. Up close, Luca Devereaux was worse. The photographs didn't capture the sharp intelligence in his eyes, or the way he studied people like he was deciding which bones to break first. A thin scar cut through his left eyebrow. His hands rested flat on the table, still and controlled, but his knuckles carried faint bruises that looked fresh. "You're dripping on my floor." His voice was quieter than she expected, almost conversational. That somehow made it worse. Evelyn swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, I didn't ask for an apology. I made an observation." He leaned back slightly, studying her face like she was a contract written in a language he found mildly interesting. "You have 30 seconds to tell me why you walked into my lounge looking like a drowned cat with a death wish." Heat flooded her cheeks. She wanted to leave, wanted to disappear into the rain and never think about this moment again. But then she thought about Preston's face when he saw her tomorrow night, thought about standing in that empty church while whispers crashed over her like waves, thought about being the girl everyone pitied. She pulled the velvet ring box from her pocket and set it on the table between them. Luca's eyes dropped to the box. His expression didn't change. "If you're proposing, I'm not interested." "It's payment." "For what?" Evelyn's voice came out steadier than she felt. 4 hours of your time, tomorrow night, Belmont Estate engagement party." Silence stretched between them like a blade. Then Luca laughed. It wasn't loud, wasn't cruel, just a low sound of genuine amusement that somehow hurt worse than mockery. He reached for the ring box and opened it with one hand. Inside, her grandmother's engagement ring caught the light. White gold band, small diamond, nothing extravagant but everything precious. "You want to hire me as your date to an engagement party?" "Yes." "And you're paying me with a ring that's worth maybe $4,000 if you find the right buyer." Evelyn's throat tightened. "It's all I have." Luca snapped the box shut and slid it back across the table toward her. "Then you can't afford me. I charge $50,000 for appearances. More if there's a chance I'll need to kill someone." The floor tilted beneath her feet. $50,000. She didn't have $50 in her checking account after paying for a wedding that never happened. "I don't have that kind of money." "I know." Luca stood in one smooth motion. He was taller than she expected, broader, the kind of presence that swallowed all the air in a room. "You should leave before Dante decides you're wasting my time." He turned to walk away. Panic clawed up Evelyn's spine. This was it. Her last desperate plan crumbling into nothing. She would show up to Preston's engagement party alone tomorrow night, or worse, she wouldn't show up at all. Either way, she lost. "He left me at the altar this morning." Luca stopped walking. Evelyn's voice cracked. 300 people. My students came. I wore my mother's veil. And Preston Calloway stood at the front of that venue and told everyone he made a mistake, that he found someone better. Then he walked out and left me standing there in a wedding dress while everyone stared. She wasn't crying, refused to cry, but her hands shook so badly she had to shove them back into her pockets. "Tomorrow night he's throwing an engagement party for his new fiancée, Senator Whitmore's daughter. Everyone who watched me get destroyed today will be there watching him celebrate. And Her voice failed. She forced it back. "I just want to walk into that room and show them I'm not broken, that I moved on too, that I'm fine." Luca turned back around slowly. His expression was unreadable. "Are you fine?" "No." The honesty surprised her, but lying to a man who probably tortured people for breakfast seemed stupid. "You want revenge. I want dignity." "Same thing," dressed differently. Luca walked back to the table and sat down again. He gestured to the seat across from him. Sit. Evelyn sat before her legs could give out. Luca studied her face for a long moment. What's your name? Evelyn Hart. What do you do, Evelyn Hart? I teach second grade, Bright Harbor Elementary. Something flickered across his expression, too fast to name. So you spend your days with children who still believe people are good. Most days. And now you're sitting in a criminal lounge asking a man who's killed more people than you've taught to pretend he loves you for 4 hours. Luca's eyes stayed locked on hers. You understand how insane that is? Yes. You understand I could take your ring, take anything else I wanted, and you couldn't stop me? Yes. Then why are you still sitting here? Evelyn met his gaze without flinching. Because I don't have any other options, and because you haven't said no yet. Silence dropped between them again, but this time it felt different, heavier, like the moment before lightning struck. Luca leaned forward, elbows on the table. I'll do it. Relief crashed through her so hard she nearly collapsed. Thank you. I'm not finished. His voice cut through her gratitude like glass. I'll go to your engagement party. I'll play the devoted boyfriend. I'll make sure every person in that room chokes on their own shock, but the ring isn't payment. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Then what? 2 weeks, starting tomorrow. Every night from 8 until midnight, you belong to me. Her heart stopped. What? You want to walk into that party looking like someone who moved on? Like someone who isn't broken? Luca's eyes burned with something dark and certain. Then I'm going to teach you how to survive in a world built to destroy people like you. I'm going to show you how to command a room, how to weaponize confidence, how to make men like your ex-fiancé realize exactly what they lost. Evelyn's voice came out barely above a whisper. Why would you do that? Luca stood again. This time he didn't walk away. He leaned down until his face was inches from hers, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes and smell expensive cologne mixed with something sharper. Danger, maybe. Or truth. Because I know exactly what it feels like to be thrown away by someone who promised you everything. And I know what it takes to make sure no one ever does it again. He straightened and buttoned his suit jacket in one smooth motion. Dante will take you home. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, he'll pick you up from your apartment. Wear something you don't mind ruining. We start with the basics. Evelyn's head spun. What basics? Luca's smile was cold and beautiful and absolutely terrifying. How to walk into a room full of predators without looking like prey. Dante drove a black Mercedes that smelled like leather and gunpowder. He didn't speak during the 20-minute ride to Evelyn's apartment in the North District. Just drove with the kind of focus that suggested he'd done this route 1,000 times, probably while bodies bled out in the trunk. Evelyn pressed herself against the passenger door and tried not to think about what she'd just agreed to. 2 weeks. Every night. Belonging to Luca Devereaux. What did that even mean? Her mind conjured a dozen horrible scenarios involving basements and duct tape and shallow graves. But if Luca wanted to hurt her, he could have done it already. Could have taken the ring and thrown her out into the rain. Could have laughed in her face and told Dante to make sure she never came back. Instead, he agreed to help her. Why? The Mercedes pulled up outside her building. A converted warehouse split into affordable apartments for people who didn't mind sirens and graffiti. Dante put the car in park but didn't kill the engine. Tomorrow. 8 sharp. Don't make me wait. Evelyn nodded and climbed out into the rain. She didn't look back. Didn't watch the Mercedes disappear down the street. Just walked up 3 flights of stairs to an apartment that still had wedding gifts stacked in the corner. Her phone sat on the kitchen counter where she'd left it 6 hours ago, screen dark and mercifully silent. 37 missed calls, 62 text messages. She didn't read a single one. Instead, she walked to her bedroom, peeled off her soaked dress, and stood in front of the mirror. A stranger stared back. Wet hair. Smudged makeup. Eyes that looked bruised from crying earlier. This was the woman Preston discarded. The woman 300 people pitied. Tomorrow night, Evelyn would start becoming someone else. Someone who didn't flinch. Someone who didn't break. Someone who could stand beside a monster and look like she belonged there. She touched the mirror with shaking fingers and made a promise to the stranger looking back. No matter what the next 2 weeks cost, She would walk into Preston's engagement party and make him regret every second he spent thinking she wasn't enough, even if it killed her. Dante arrived at 7:58 the next night. Evelyn was waiting outside her building, hands shoved into the pockets of old jeans and a black sweater Luca's instructions told her to wear. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry. She looked exactly like what she was, terrified. The Mercedes pulled up. Dante didn't get out to open her door. She climbed in. Seatbelt. Evelyn buckled up while Dante merged into traffic. The city lights blurred past her window. Neon signs, food trucks, pedestrians who had no idea she was driving towards something that would either save or completely destroy her. Where are we going? The docks. Her stomach clenched. Why the docks? Dante's expression stayed flat. Boss's orders. 20 minutes later, they pulled into an industrial shipping yard that looked abandoned. Rusted containers stacked 3 stories high, floodlights casting long shadows across cracked pavement, the smell of salt water and diesel fuel thick enough to choke on. Dante parked beside a warehouse with no windows. Evelyn's hands started shaking. Out. She climbed out of the car on legs that barely held her weight. Dante walked to the warehouse door and pulled it open. Warm light spilled out into the darkness. Inside was nothing like she expected. The warehouse had been converted into something between a gym and a training facility. Punching bags hung from ceiling chains. Weight racks lined one wall. A boxing ring sat in the center beneath industrial lights. And standing in the middle of that ring, wearing black pants and no shirt, was Luca Devereaux. Evelyn stopped breathing. She had seen him in a suit, seen him look dangerous and controlled and untouchable. But this was different. This was Luca stripped down to muscle and scars and brutal honesty. His torso was a map of violence. Thin white lines across his ribs, a puckered bullet wound near his left shoulder, darker marks that looked like burns along his lower back. He wasn't hiding anything anymore. "You're late," Luca's voice echoed across the warehouse. Evelyn checked her phone. 8:03. 3 minutes. In my world, 3 minutes gets you killed. He gestured toward the ring. "Get up here." She climbed through the ropes on shaking legs. The canvas felt strange beneath her sneakers. Too soft, like standing on something that might give out any second. Luca circled her slowly, studying every detail. "You're scared." "Yes." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp, but it can't control you." He stopped in front of her. First lesson. Power isn't about strength. It's about presence. How you hold yourself in a room, how you look at people, whether you flinch when someone tries to intimidate you. "I flinch all the time." "I know. That's why we're here." Luca stepped closer, close enough that Evelyn had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "I'm going to teach you how to be untouchable. But first, you need to understand what it costs." "What do you mean?" "Look at me." His voice dropped lower, quieter. "Really look at me." Evelyn looked, not at his face, at the scars, the damage, the evidence written across his skin that survival wasn't gentle and power came soaked in violence. "I've killed 17 men," Luca said calmly. "Some of them deserved it. Some of them were just in the way. I've buried bodies in places no one will ever find. I've broken every law that matters and half the ones that don't. And I sleep fine at night because I stopped pretending the world was fair a long time ago." His eyes burned into hers. "So before we go any further, you need to decide if you can stand next to someone like me and not hate yourself for it. Because once you walk into that engagement party on my arm, everyone will know exactly what you chose, and they won't forget." Evelyn's throat felt tight. Her hands were still shaking. Everything about this was wrong, dangerous, insane. But she thought about Preston, about the way he looked at her in that venue 4 hours before the wedding and said, "I'm sorry, this was a mistake." Not the wedding. Her. She was the mistake. Evelyn lifted her chin and met Luca's eyes without flinching. "Teach me." Something flickered across his expression. Approval, maybe. Or recognition. He stepped back and gestured to the center of the ring. "Stand there, shoulders back, feet apart." She obeyed. "Now look at me like I'm beneath you, like I'm not worth your time, like you'd rather be anywhere else." Evelyn tried, but her expression felt forced, Fake. Luca shook his head. Again, and this time, remember every person who pitied you yesterday. Every whisper, every look. Let that anger fill you up until there's no room left for shame. She tried again. This time something shifted. The trembling in her hand stopped. Her spine straightened, and when she looked at Luca, she didn't see the man who agreed to help her. She saw every person who thought she was weak. Better. Luca walked in a slow circle around her. Now walk. Across the ring. Like you own it. Like the canvas would catch fire if you wanted it to. Evelyn walked. Luca stopped her after 3 steps. You're apologizing with your body. Every step says sorry for existing. Try again. She tried again, and again, and again. For 2 hours, Luca drilled her on presence. How to enter a room, how to stand when people were watching, how to make eye contact and hold it until the other person looked away first. He was brutal, relentless. Every mistake earned cold correction. But he never touched her, never crossed a line she didn't draw first. By 10 o'clock, Evelyn's legs ached, and sweat soaked through her sweater. But when Luca told her to walk across the ring one final time, something had changed. Her footsteps didn't apologize anymore. She stopped in front of him and met his eyes with something that almost resembled confidence. Luca studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded once. That's enough for tonight. Tomorrow we work on voice. How to speak without asking permission. How to deliver a threat wrapped in politeness. Evelyn's heart was still pounding. Why are you really helping me? The question hung between them like smoke. Luca's expression didn't change, but his eyes went somewhere distant, somewhere dark. Because 10 years ago, I stood in a room full of people who thought I was nothing, and I made a choice. Either disappear or become someone they'd never forget. He stepped closer. Close enough that Evelyn could see the exhaustion beneath his control. The weight he carried that had nothing to do with muscle. I chose violence. You're choosing something smarter. But the principle is the same. His voice dropped to something almost gentle. Make them remember. Make them regret. And never, ever let them see you flinch again. Evelyn swallowed hard. What if I can't do it? Then you'll fail. And I'll still take you to that engagement party because I gave you my word. Luca turned and walked toward the ropes. But you won't fail. I can see it in you already. See what? He glanced back over his shoulder. The warehouse lights cast shadows across his face that made him look like something carved from darkness itself. Survival instinct. You walked into my lounge last night knowing I could destroy you, but you did it anyway because staying broken hurt worse than dying. His eyes locked onto hers. That's not weakness, Evelyn. That's the most dangerous thing in the world. What is? Luca's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Someone with nothing left to lose. Night 3. Evelyn learned how to lie. Not the small lies people told at dinner parties or job interviews. The kind of lies that rewrote entire histories with nothing but tone and steady eye contact. Luca sat across from her in the warehouse under harsh fluorescent lights, a bottle of whiskey on the table between them neither of them had touched. Tell me about your childhood, he said. Evelyn blinked. What? Lie to me. Make me believe you grew up somewhere you didn't. Convince me your parents were different people. Sell me a completely different version of Evelyn Hart. Luca leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. And make it good enough that I don't catch you. She tried. Stumbled through a story about growing up in Boston instead of the suburbs outside the city. About parents who were doctors instead of a teacher and a mechanic. Her voice wavered. Her hands fidgeted with the edge of her sleeve. Luca stopped her after 90 seconds. Terrible. You're apologizing for lying before the lie even finishes. Try again. I don't understand why this matters. Because when we walk into that engagement party, people are going to ask questions. Where did we meet? How long have we been together? What you see in someone like me? His eyes stayed locked on hers. And you need to sell them a story so convincing they never doubt it for a second. Because the moment they smell weakness, they'll tear you apart just to watch you bleed. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Fine, ask me again. Tell me about your childhood. This time she didn't hesitate. She built a story about summers in Cape Cod and parents who fought behind closed doors, and a brother who died when she was 12. None of it was true, but she made her voice steady, kept her hands still. Let the lie fill the space between them like it was the most natural thing in the world. Luca watched her in silence for a long moment after she finished. Then he nodded slowly. Better. Still not perfect, but better. What gave me away? Your breathing changed when you mentioned the dead brother. You created distance from the lie by holding your breath. He stood and walked around the table until he was standing directly behind her chair. Lying isn't about words. It's about commitment. You have to believe the story you're telling more than the person listening does. Otherwise, they'll feel the hesitation. Evelyn felt the weight of his presence behind her like heat. How do you get that good at lying? Practice. Necessity. Survival. Luca's voice dropped lower. And understanding that truth is just a story people agree to believe. Change the story, you change the truth. She turned in her chair to look up at him. Is anything you've told me true? Something dangerous flickered across his expression. Does it matter? Yes. Luca held her gaze for 3 seconds that felt like hours. Then he walked back to his side of the table and sat down. The scar through my eyebrow. I got that when I was 16. My brother smashed a bottle across my face during a fight about money I stole from our father's wallet. Evelyn's breath caught. Your brother, is dead. I killed him 6 years later when he sold me out to the Volkov syndicate for a promotion. Luca's voice was flat, empty, like he was reading a grocery list instead of confessing murder. So yes, some of what I've told you is true. The rest is whatever story I need people to believe that day. Silence settled between them, heavy enough to crush bone. Evelyn should have been horrified, should have stood up and walked out and never looked back. But instead, she heard herself asking, why did he sell you out? Luca's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a glass and drained it in one swallow. Because he thought I was weak. Thought I cared too much about the wrong things. And he was right. Luca set the glass down with controlled precision. I did care. About loyalty. About family. About keeping promises even when it cost me everything. His eyes met hers, and the darkness there was absolute. My brother taught me that caring makes you a target, so I stopped caring, and I made sure everyone who ever thought I was weak understood exactly how wrong they were. Evelyn's throat felt tight. How many people did you kill to prove that? Enough that I stopped counting. Luca stood abruptly. We're done for tonight. Tomorrow we work on body language, how to touch someone and make it look like affection instead of performance. Heat flooded Evelyn's face. Touch. Relax. I'm not asking you to sleep with me. His voice carried an edge of dark amusement. But if we're supposed to be a couple, you need to learn how to stand next to me without looking like I'm holding you hostage. How to let me put my hand on your waist without flinching. Small things that sell the illusion. He walked toward the warehouse door, then stopped and glanced back. And Evelyn, stop trying to figure me out. You'll just give yourself nightmares. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving her alone in the fluorescent light with the taste of someone else's demons in the air. Night 4. Dante picked her up 30 minutes early. Evelyn climbed into the Mercedes, expecting another trip to the warehouse. Instead, Dante drove in the opposite direction, toward the financial district where buildings stretched toward the sky like glass monuments to greed. Where are we going? Shopping. For what? Dante's expression stayed flat. Boss's orders. They pulled up outside a boutique that didn't have a name on the door. Just a street number in brass and windows covered with frosted film. Dante parked illegally and gestured for her to get out. Inside, the boutique smelled like expensive leather and exclusivity. A woman in her 50s with silver hair and immaculate posture appeared from behind a velvet curtain. Miss Hart, we've been expecting you. Her smile was professional, distant. Mr. Devereaux called ahead with specific instructions. Please, follow me. Evelyn followed her into a private fitting room 3 times the size of her entire bedroom. Dresses hung on racks along one wall. Shoes lined another. Jewelry glittered beneath display lights that probably cost more than her car. Mr. Devereaux requests you select 3 outfits. 1 for casual evening events, 1 for formal dinners, 1 for... The woman paused delicately. High-profile public appearances where first impressions matter. Translation: the engagement party. Evelyn's hands trembled as she touched a midnight blue silk dress that felt like water between her fingers. The price tag said $12,000. She dropped it like it burned. I can't afford any of this. Mr. Devereaux has covered all expenses. Please take your time. The woman disappeared back through the curtain, leaving Evelyn alone with more wealth than she'd seen in her entire life. For 20 minutes, she stood frozen among dresses that cost more than her annual salary. This was insane. All of it. She was a second-grade teacher who bought groceries with coupons and wore the same 3 cardigans on rotation. What was she doing pretending she belonged in a world where people spent $12,000 on a single dress? Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered anyway. Stop overthinking. Luca's voice cut through her spiral instantly. Pick the dress that makes you feel dangerous. Not pretty. Not elegant. Dangerous. How did you know I was... Because you've been standing in that fitting room for 20 minutes without trying anything on. Security cameras. He paused. The blue silk. 3rd rack from the left. That one. Evelyn turned and found the dress he meant. Midnight blue, like he said, but not the one she'd touched earlier. This one was darker, simpler, the kind of dress that didn't apologize for taking up space. She pulled it off the rack. Try it on, Luca said through the phone. And Evelyn? Stop thinking about the price. Money is just another form of power. Either you control it or it controls you. The line went dead. Evelyn stared at the dress in her hands for a long moment. Then she stripped down to her underwear and pulled it on. The silk slid over her skin like a promise. The dress fit perfectly, tailored to measurements she didn't remember giving. It hugged her waist and fell to just above her knees. The neckline was high, but the back plunged low enough to show spine and shoulder blades. She looked at herself in the full-length mirror. A stranger looked back. Not the girl Preston left at the altar, not the teacher who graded spelling tests and bought clearance cardigans. Someone else entirely. Someone who looked like she could stand beside a monster and belong there. Evelyn touched the mirror with shaking fingers and felt something shift deep in her chest. Not confidence. Not yet. But the raw edge of possibility. The fitting room curtain pulled back. Luca stood in the doorway wearing a charcoal suit and an expression that gave away nothing. His eyes traveled slowly from her face down to her bare feet and back up again. The silence stretched until Evelyn's skin felt too tight. Turn around. She turned, felt his gaze on the exposed curve of her spine like a physical touch. Again. She faced him again. Her heart hammered so hard she could hear blood rushing in her ears. Luca stepped into the fitting room and closed the curtain behind him. The space suddenly felt impossibly small. He moved closer until only inches separated them. Do you know what people will think when they see you in this dress? Evelyn's voice came out barely above a whisper. What? That I'm either the luckiest bastard alive or the most dangerous one. His eyes stayed locked on hers. And both of those things protect you. Because no one touches what belongs to me without consequences. Heat flooded her face. I don't belong to you. Not yet. Luca reached up and adjusted the thin strap on her shoulder with careful precision. His fingers barely grazed her skin, but the contact sent electricity straight down her spine. But for the next 10 days, you're going to learn how to make everyone believe you do. Starting now. He stepped back and pulled his phone from his pocket. Put your hand on my chest. What? You heard me. We're practicing. Put your hand on my chest like you've done it 1,000 times before. Evelyn hesitated. Then she lifted her hand and pressed her palm against his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath expensive fabric and muscle. Completely controlled. Unlike hers, which felt like it might explode. Good. Now look at me like I'm the only person in the world who matters. She tried, but her expression felt forced, awkward. Luca's free hand came up and curved gently against her jaw, tilting her face up toward his. Stop performing. Just breathe. Evelyn breathed. His thumb traced a slow line along her cheekbone. The touch was careful, almost gentle, but his eyes stayed dark and unreadable. When we're in public, I'm going to touch you like this. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing that crosses lines we haven't agreed to. But enough that people believe we're real. His voice dropped lower. Which means you need to stop flinching every time I get close. I'm not flinching. Your pupils dilated the second I stepped into this room. Your breathing went shallow. Every muscle in your body tensed. his thumb stilled against her cheek. That's biological fear response. And if you can't control it, everyone at that engagement party will see through us in 30 seconds. Shame burned through her chest. I don't know how to stop it. Exposure, repetition, time. Luca stepped back and the loss of contact felt shockingly cold. Which is why for the next 10 days, you're going to practice being close to me until your body stops treating me like a threat. Evelyn's hands curled into fists at her sides. And if it doesn't work, then we adjust the plan, but it will work. He held her gaze with absolute certainty. Because you're tougher than you think you are. You just haven't had a reason to prove it yet. Something in his voice made her believe him. Against all logic, against every survival instinct screaming that trusting a man like Luca Devereaux would only end in blood. Get dressed. We have dinner reservations in an hour. Evelyn blinked. Dinner? Field test. You're going to walk into a restaurant on my arm and convince everyone there that you're exactly where you belong. Luca opened the curtain and stepped out. And Evelyn? Wear the dress. The restaurant was called Vertigo and sat on the 42nd floor of a building that probably had its own weather system. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city lights like scattered diamonds. Every table cost $500 minimum. Every guest looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine cover. Evelyn's hands shook as the elevator climbed. Luca stood beside her in his charcoal suit, completely relaxed. Like walking into rooms designed to make normal people feel insignificant was something he did every Tuesday. Breathe, he said quietly. I am breathing. No, you're hyperventilating. He glanced at her. Remember what we practiced. Shoulders back, chin up. Look at everyone like they're beneath you. Not aggressively, just factually. The elevator doors opened. A hostess in a black dress that probably cost more than Evelyn's monthly rent smiled at them. Mr. Devereaux, your table is ready. Luca placed his hand on the small of Evelyn's back. The touch was light, possessive, exactly what he'd warned her about. Every eye in the restaurant turned to watch them walk through. Evelyn's first instinct was to shrink, to apologize with her body language for taking up space. But Luca's hand pressed slightly firmer against her spine, and she remembered. Shoulders back, chin up, dangerous. She lifted her chin and walked beside him like she owned the entire 42nd floor, like the people staring were lucky to see her, like she'd done this 1,000 times before. Their table sat beside the windows with a view that stretched all the way to the harbor. Luca pulled out her chair before she could reach for it herself. She sat. He sat across from her. A waiter appeared instantly with menus and wine recommendations Evelyn didn't understand. We'll have the tasting menu, and bring a bottle of the Chateau Margaux 2015. Luca handed back the menus without looking at them. Thank you. The waiter disappeared. Evelyn leaned forward and whispered, I don't know what half those words meant. You don't need to. Just smile and let me order. Luca's expression stayed neutral, but his eyes carried dark amusement. Lesson 7. In rooms like this, confidence matters more than knowledge. Act like you belong and people will believe you. Hesitate for 1 second and they'll tear you apart. Is that what you do? Fake it until it's real? No. I stopped faking anything years ago. He leaned back in his chair completely at ease. I walk into rooms like this knowing I could buy everyone here and burn the building down before dessert if I felt like it. That's not confidence. That's certainty. The casual way he said it made Evelyn's stomach clench. This was real. The money, the power, the absolute control he had over everything around him. She kept forgetting that underneath the lessons and the careful touches, Luca Devereaux was exactly what people feared, a monster in expensive tailoring. Wine arrived. Luca tasted it, nodded approval. The waiter poured 2 glasses and disappeared again. Evelyn stared at the deep red liquid in her glass like it might have answers. You're thinking too much again, Luca said. I'm thinking this is insane, all of it. 5 days ago, I was grading spelling tests. Now I'm sitting in a 42nd floor restaurant wearing a $12,000 dress, having dinner with a man who just casually mentioned burning buildings down. And I don't know if I can do this. Her voice cracked. I don't know if I can walk into Preston's engagement party and convince 300 people I'm someone I'm not. Luca set his wine glass down with careful precision. You're wrong about something. What? You're not pretending to be someone you're not. His eyes locked onto hers with that same dark certainty. You're becoming who you were always supposed to be before Preston Calloway convinced you that small and quiet and grateful was enough. Evelyn's throat tightened. I've watched you for 5 nights now, Luca continued. Watched you walk into that warehouse terrified and walk out stronger every single time. Watched you learn how to lie and hold eye contact and take up space without apologizing. That's not performance, Evelyn. That's survival instinct finally waking up. He leaned forward. So stop telling yourself you're faking. You're not. You're just remembering what it feels like to be dangerous. Before she could respond, movement caught her attention across the restaurant. Her entire body went cold. Preston Calloway stood at the hostess station with Senator Whitmore's daughter on his arm. No. No. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. She wasn't ready. Hadn't practiced enough. The engagement party was still 10 days away, and she needed those 10 days to become someone strong enough to face him. Evelyn. Luca's voice cut through her panic like a blade. Look at me. She dragged her eyes away from Preston and met Luca's gaze. Breathe. You're fine. I'm right here. His voice was calm, steady. And in about 30 seconds, your ex-fiancé is going to walk past this table and see you. When he does, I need you to smile at me like I'm the only person in the world who matters. Can you do that? Evelyn's hands shook. I don't. Yes or no? She swallowed hard. Yes. Good girl. Luca reached across the table and took her hand in his. His thumb traced slow circles against her palm, and the touch grounded her enough that the panic receded to something manageable. Footsteps approached their table. Preston's voice cut through the ambient restaurant noise like broken glass. Evelyn? She turned slowly, Luca's hand still wrapped around hers. Preston stood 3 feet away, looking like he'd seen a corpse stand up and walk. His new fiancée, blonde, beautiful, dripping in diamonds, looked equally shocked. Preston. Evelyn's voice came out steadier than she felt. What a surprise. I didn't. Preston's eyes dropped to her hand in Luca's. What are you doing here? Having dinner. She smiled, not the warm smile she used to give him, something sharper. You remember how much I loved the view from Vertigo? That was a lie. She'd never been to Vertigo before in her life. But Preston didn't know that. His jaw tightened. I didn't know you were seeing someone. It's recent. Evelyn glanced at Luca and found him watching Preston with the kind of focused attention predators gave prey. Preston, this is... Luca Devereaux. Preston's face went pale. I know who he is. Silence dropped between them like a guillotine blade. Senator Whitmore's daughter tugged on Preston's arm. Preston, our table. In a moment. Preston's eyes stayed locked on Evelyn. Can I speak with you privately? Before Evelyn could answer, Luca stood in one smooth motion. He was taller than Preston by 3 inches, broader by 40 pounds. And when he smiled, it was the kind of smile that made smart people remember they had somewhere else to be. I don't think that's a good idea. Luca's voice was pleasant, conversational, absolutely terrifying. Evelyn and I are in the middle of something. I'm sure you understand. Preston's hands curled into fists. This is none of your business. Actually, anything involving Evelyn is very much my business. Luca's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold as winter oceans. So I'm going to suggest you return to your table and enjoy your evening, somewhere far away from here. The threat was wrapped in politeness, but impossible to miss. Preston looked at Evelyn one more time. We need to talk. No. The word came out of her mouth before fear could stop it. We really don't. Something flickered across Preston's face. Hurt, maybe. Or disbelief that the woman he discarded had found her spine. He opened his mouth to argue. Luca took a single step forward. Leave. Now. Preston left, dragging his confused fiancée behind him. Evelyn's hands started shaking the moment they disappeared. Adrenaline dumped through her system so fast she felt dizzy. She'd done it. Faced Preston without falling apart, without begging for explanations or closure. But the cost was written across every trembling muscle in her body. Luca sat back down and signaled the waiter. Cancel the tasting menu. We're leaving. What? No. I'm fine. You're in shock. And if we stay, you're going to crash hard enough that everyone in this restaurant will see it. He stood and offered his hand. Come on. Evelyn took his hand and let him guide her toward the elevator. Her legs felt like water, her vision blurred at the edges. By the time the elevator doors closed, she was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Luca pressed the button for the ground floor, then turned to face her. You did well. I can't feel my hands. That's adrenaline. It'll pass. He reached out and steadied her when she swayed. Just breathe through it. The elevator descended in silence. Evelyn focused on breathing. In through her nose, out through her mouth, slow and controlled until the shaking started to ease. When the doors opened, Dante was already waiting at the curb with the Mercedes running. Luca helped her into the back seat, then climbed in beside her. Take us to the penthouse. Dante pulled into traffic without a word. Evelyn's brain finally caught up to what Luca had just said. Wait, what penthouse? Mine. You're not going home alone tonight. His voice left no room for argument. You're going to crash hard in about 20 minutes, and I'm not having you do that in some apartment by yourself. I don't need... This isn't negotiable, Evelyn. Luca's eyes met hers in the darkness. You faced your ex-fiancé 5 days earlier than planned and held your ground. That took guts. But it also means your nervous system is about to shut down from overload. So you're staying at the penthouse until your body remembers how to function normally again. She should have argued, should have insisted on going home. But the truth was, the thought of being alone in her apartment right now made her want to scream. Okay? Luca's expression softened slightly. Okay? The Mercedes climbed through the financial district toward a building Evelyn recognized from news articles about luxury real estate. Dante pulled into an underground garage and parked beside a private elevator. They rode up in silence. Evelyn's hands had stopped shaking, but exhaustion crashed over her in waves. The elevator opened directly into Luca's penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the harbor. Modern furniture in blacks and grays. Art on the walls that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. Everything clean and expensive and completely devoid of personality. Like a hotel suite someone rich forgot to live in. Guest room is down the hall, second door on the left. Luca shrugged out of his suit jacket and draped it over a chair. There's clothes in the closet that should fit. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. Evelyn stood in the middle of his living room feeling completely unmoored. Why are you being nice to me? Luca paused halfway to the kitchen. What? All of this. The dress. The dinner. Bringing me here instead of just dropping me off at home. She gestured helplessly at the space around them. You're a criminal. You've killed people. You told me yourself you stopped caring about anything years ago. So why are you helping me? He turned to face her fully. For a long moment, he just stood there, studying her face like he was deciding whether to answer honestly or feed her another comfortable lie. Then he crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and stopped close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. You want the truth? Yes. Because when you walked into my lounge 5 nights ago, you reminded me what it felt like to want something badly enough to destroy yourself getting it. His voice was low, raw. And I haven't felt that in so long, I forgot it existed. Evelyn's breath caught. What do you want? Luca's eyes searched her face like he was looking for something he'd lost a long time ago. I don't know yet, but for the first time in a decade, I want to find out. The air between them felt charged with something dangerous, something that would change everything if either of them moved wrong. Luca stepped back before the tension could break. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we work on how to weaponize charm. He disappeared into another room, leaving Evelyn standing in the middle of his penthouse with her heart racing and every carefully built wall she'd constructed around herself starting to crack. Night 7. Everything fell apart. Evelyn arrived at the warehouse at 8 sharp. Dante had picked her up like always. The drive had been quiet like always. Nothing felt different until she walked through the warehouse door and found Luca standing in the boxing ring holding a gun. Her entire body froze. Relax, it's not loaded. Luca set the weapon on the ring mat. But you need to know what this feels like, what it looks like. Because the world I operate in doesn't just involve fancy dinners and expensive clothes. There's violence beneath all of it. And if you're going to stand beside me at that engagement party, you need to understand exactly what you're stepping into. Evelyn's mouth went dry. I don't want to... Hold a gun? Learn how to recognize when someone's carrying? Understand the difference between a threat and performance? Luca's voice was patient but firm. Those aren't requests. They're survival skills. She climbed into the ring on shaking legs. For the next hour, Luca taught her how to identify concealed weapons, how to read body language that suggested violence, how to position herself in a room to always have an exit route. He was clinical, professional, like he was teaching her to change a tire instead of survive situations that might get her killed. But when he picked up the unloaded gun and demonstrated proper grip, something in Evelyn's chest cracked open. This was real. All of it. The danger. The violence. The absolute certainty that standing beside Luca Devereaux meant accepting a world where people solve problems with bullets and fear. I can't do this. The words fell out of her mouth before she could stop them. Luca lowered the gun. What? This? Any of this? Evelyn's voice shook. I thought I could. Thought I was strong enough to walk into Preston's engagement party on your arm and make him regret everything. But I'm not. I'm a second-grade teacher. I help kids learn to read. I can't. You're spiraling. I'm being realistic. Her voice cracked. What am I doing here? Learning to lie and hold guns and pretend I belong in a world where people kill each other? This isn't who I am. Luca set the gun down carefully. Then who are you? I don't know anymore. Good. He stepped closer. Because the version of you that knew exactly who she was got left at an altar 5 days ago. And you can either spend the rest of your life being that person, small and grateful and safe, or you can become someone different. Tears burned in Evelyn's eyes. I don't want to become someone who needs to know how to identify concealed weapons. Too late. You're already looking at everyone who enters a room differently than you did a week ago. Luca's voice was brutal in its honesty. You're already calculating exits and watching body language and measuring threats. That's not me changing you. That's you waking up to how the world actually works. I hate it. I know. His expression softened slightly. But hating it doesn't make it less true. Evelyn turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. The warehouse felt too big, too empty, like it might swallow her whole. Behind her, Luca's voice dropped lower. My brother used to say the same thing, that he hated the family business, hated the violence, wanted out. Silence stretched between them. What happened to him? Evelyn asked quietly. He stayed in long enough that getting out meant betraying everyone he ever claimed to care about. Luca's footsteps moved closer. And when I found out, I put 3 bullets in his chest and buried him in a shipping container beneath 40 feet of water. Evelyn spun around. You killed your own brother. Yes. And you don't feel anything about it? Luca's expression was carved from stone. I feel relief that he can't hurt anyone else I care about. I feel satisfaction that betrayal has consequences, and I feel absolutely certain I'd do it again if I had to. Horror crawled up Evelyn's spine. How do you live with that? By accepting that some people can't be saved, only survived. His eyes bored into hers. And by making sure I never become weak enough to need saving myself. The warehouse door slammed open. Both of them turned. A man Evelyn had never seen before stumbled through the entrance bleeding from his shoulder. His shirt was soaked red. His face was pale as death. Boss! His voice came out ragged. We've got a problem. Luca was across the warehouse in seconds. What happened? Volkov's men hit this harbor shipment, took everything, killed 3 of ours. The man swayed on his feet. They left a message. Said if you don't meet with Dmitri personally by midnight, they're coming for the rest of your operations. Luca's expression went cold as winter. Where's Dante? Securing the secondary locations. He sent me to warn you. Get to a hospital. Use the cover story about the construction accident. Luca pulled his phone from his pocket and started typing. Tell them I'll handle Dmitri. The bleeding man nodded and stumbled back toward the door. It slammed shut behind him. Silence dropped like a bomb. Evelyn stood in the boxing ring watching Luca transform into something she'd only seen glimpses of before. His entire demeanor shifted. The careful control disappeared. What remained was pure predator. You need to leave. His voice was flat, empty of anything human. What? Dante will take you home. Now. Luca didn't look at her, just kept typing on his phone with mechanical precision. This doesn't concern you. You're going to meet with someone named Dmitri who just killed 3 of your people. Yes. Alone? That's how this works. Luca finally looked up, and his eyes were completely dead. Go home, Evelyn. Forget you saw any of this, and when Dante picks you up tomorrow night, we'll pretend it never happened. She should have run. Should have climbed out of that ring and let Dante drive her as far away from Luca Devereaux as physics allowed. But instead, she heard herself say, no. Luca went very still. Excuse me? I'm not leaving. Evelyn climbed out of the ring and walked toward him, even though every survival instinct screamed to do the opposite. You spent a week teaching me not to run from dangerous situations, teaching me to hold my ground and take up space and stop apologizing for existing, so I'm not running now. This is different. How? Because this is my world, my violence, my consequences. His voice carried an edge sharp enough to draw blood. And you don't belong anywhere near it. Evelyn stopped 2 feet away from him. Then why did you spend 7 nights making me belong? The question hung in the air like smoke. Luca's jaw tightened. For 3 seconds, something almost human flickered across his expression. Then it disappeared behind walls built from violence and survival. Get out, Evelyn. No. I'm not asking. Neither am I. She lifted her chin and met his eyes without flinching. You're going to meet Dmitri, and I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Why? Because it's dangerous? Because I might get hurt? Her voice rose. You've been preparing me for exactly this kind of situation all week. Teaching me how to survive rooms full of predators, how to hold my ground when people try to intimidate me. Well, here's your chance to see if any of it worked. Luca's hands curled into fists at his sides. You have no idea what you're asking. Then tell me. Dmitri Volkov runs the East Coast arms trade. He's brutal, unpredictable, and smart enough to know that killing me would start a war he might not win. But he'll torture me for hours first just to prove a point. Luca's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. And if you're standing beside me when he does, he'll use you to break me. Slowly. Until I beg him to kill us both just to make it stop. Evelyn's blood turned to ice, but she didn't step back. Didn't flinch. Then teach me how to survive that too. Something in Luca's expression cracked, just for a second. Then he turned away and dragged both hands through his hair like he was trying to physically hold himself together. You're insane. I learned from the best, he laughed. The sound was dark and broken and absolutely without humor. If you die because of this, I'll never forgive myself. If I run now, I'll never forgive myself either. Luca stood there for a long moment staring at nothing. Then he pulled his phone back out and made a call. Dante, change of plans. Bring the car around. We're both going. He ended the call and finally looked at Evelyn again. His eyes were empty. Dead. The eyes of a man who'd already accepted they might not survive the night. Stay behind me. Don't speak unless I tell you to. And if shooting starts, you hit the ground and don't move until I say so. Understood? Evelyn nodded. Say it. Stay behind you. Don't speak. Hit the ground if shooting starts. Good. Luca walked to a metal cabinet against the warehouse wall and pulled out a shoulder holster and 2 guns. He checked both weapons with practiced efficiency, then shrugged into the holster like other people put on jackets. Evelyn watched him transform into something she barely recognized. This wasn't the man who taught her to walk into rooms with confidence. This was the monster everyone warned her about, and she was about to follow him straight into whatever hell waited on the other side of midnight. Outside, Dante's Mercedes pulled up. The engine purred like a threat. Luca opened the passenger door and looked at Evelyn one final time. Last chance to change your mind? She climbed into the car without hesitation. Luca slid in beside her. Dante pulled into traffic. Nobody spoke during the 20-minute drive to the industrial docks. Evelyn's hands shook in her lap, but she didn't try to hide it. Fear was honest. Pretending otherwise seemed stupid when driving toward people who killed for a living. The Mercedes stopped at an abandoned shipping yard lit by harsh floodlights. 3 black SUVs were already parked in formation. Men in tactical gear stood guard with automatic weapons held casually, but ready. Dante put the car in park. Want me inside? No, perimeter only. If we're not out in 30 minutes, burn everything and disappear. Dante's expression didn't change. Understood. Luca opened his door and stepped out into the harsh light. Evelyn followed, her legs trembling but functional. The shipping yard smelled like rust and salt water and violence waiting to happen. Guards watched them approach with dead eyes and triggered discipline. Ahead, a single shipping container sat illuminated beneath construction lights. The door hung open. Inside, a man sat at a metal table smoking a cigarette like he was waiting for coffee instead of orchestrating a massacre. Dmitri Volkov. He looked younger than Evelyn expected. Maybe 40, sharp features, cold smile. The kind of man who could order executions between sips of expensive wine and sleep fine afterward. Luka Devereaux. Dmitri's accent was thick Russian. And a guest. How unexpected. Luka walked into the container like he owned it. Evelyn stayed exactly 3 steps behind him, just like he'd instructed. Dmitri's eyes traveled over her slowly, assessing, measuring. Who is this? None of your concern. Luka's voice was flat. You hit my shipment, killed my people. Start talking. Direct. I appreciate that. Dmitri stubbed out his cigarette and immediately lit another. Here is situation. Your harbor operations interfere with my new East Coast expansion. I need shipping routes you control. So either you sell them to me at price I name, or I take them by force and bury you beneath same concrete your brother drowned in. Evelyn's breath caught. Luka's expression didn't change. You're threatening me in my own city. I am offering you choice. Sell and live. Refuse and die. Dmitri smiled. Very simple. And if I choose option 3, there is no option 3. Luka's smile was sharp as broken glass. There's always an option 3. He moved so fast, Evelyn barely saw it. 1 second, he was standing still. The next, he had a gun pressed against Dmitri's forehead and his other hand wrapped around the Russian's throat. Every guard in the shipping yard raised their weapons instantly. Red laser sights painted Luka's chest like target practice. But Luka didn't flinch. Option 3, he said quietly, is I put a bullet through your skull right now and deal with the war afterward. Because unlike you, I'm not afraid of consequences. I was built by them. Dmitri's eyes went wide, not with fear, with something worse. Respect. You truly are your father's son. His voice was strained from the hand around his throat, but he managed to smile anyway. Insane, fearless, and stupid enough to believe threats matter to men like us. Luka's finger tightened on the trigger. Evelyn stopped breathing. Then Dmitri laughed. I like you. This is problem. Luka's grip loosened slightly. What? I came here to kill you, take your operations, eliminate competition. Dmitri's smile widened. But now I think maybe we do business instead. You have balls. I respect balls. Even when they belong to an annoying American criminal who refuses to sell me what I want. He gestured, and every gun in the shipping yard lowered simultaneously. So here's new offer. You keep harbor routes. I take northern territory you barely use anyway. We split profit on any shipment that crosses both regions. 60-40 in your favor because you made me laugh. Luka studied Dmitri's face for a long moment. Then he lowered the gun and stepped back. 70-30 or no deal. 65-35. Deal. They shook hands like civilized businessmen, instead of killers who'd been seconds away from painting the shipping container with each other's blood. Dmitri glanced at Evelyn again. Your woman. She did not scream or run when guns were raised. Unusual. She's full of surprises. I see that. Dmitri lit a fresh cigarette. Take care of her. Women with steel spines are rare. Women who stand beside monsters without running are rarer still. He walked out of the shipping container into the night. His guards followed. Within 90 seconds, the shipping yard was empty except for Luka, Evelyn, and Dante's Mercedes idling in the distance. Luka holstered his weapon with mechanical precision. Then he turned to face Evelyn. You should have run. I know. That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen anyone do. I know that too. Luka stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Why didn't you? Evelyn's voice came out steadier than her hands felt. Because 7 nights ago you told me to stop apologizing for existing, and running away from this felt like the biggest apology I could make. Something shifted in Luka's expression. The dead eyes flickered back to life. The walls cracked just enough that she could see the man beneath the monster. And for the first time since she'd met him, Luca Devereaux looked genuinely afraid. Not of Dmitri, not of violence or war or consequences. Of her. Of what it meant that she stayed when every sane person would have run. "Get in the car," he said quietly. They drove back to the penthouse in complete silence. Evelyn's hands finally stopped shaking somewhere around the financial district. Luca stared out the window like he was watching the city for the first time. When they arrived, he didn't offer the guest room this time. Just walked to his private bar and poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a glass. Drained it, poured another. Evelyn stood in the middle of his living room watching a man who'd held a gun to someone's head 20 minutes ago try to drink away whatever he was feeling. "Say something," she whispered. Luca set the glass down hard enough that crystal cracked against marble. "What do you want me to say? That you were brave? That you proved something tonight?" His voice was raw, broken. "You almost died, Evelyn. If Dmitri had decided differently, if any one of those guards had pulled their trigger, you'd be dead right now, and it would be my fault. But I'm not dead. That's not the point." "Then what is?" Luca crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. He stopped so close she could see her reflection in his eyes. "The point is, I spent 10 years making sure I never cared about anyone enough that losing them would destroy me. And then you walked into my lounge in a wet dress, with a ring box and shattered pride, and I—" He stopped, dragged both hands through his hair, turned away. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. "And you what? I'm starting to care whether you survive this." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Which means you're not just practicing how to stand beside a monster anymore. You're becoming the one thing that could actually break me." The confession hung in the air between them like lightning before it struck. Evelyn should have been terrified, should have run while she still could. Instead, she closed the distance he'd created and touched his shoulder. "Then I guess we're both in trouble." Luca turned back slowly. His eyes searched her face like he was memorizing every detail before the world burned down. Then he kissed her. Not gentle, not careful. Like he was drowning and she was oxygen and nothing else in the world existed except this moment and this contact and the absolute certainty that they'd both just crossed a line neither of them could uncross. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, and his hands framed her face like she was something precious and breakable and utterly irreplaceable. "We can't do this," he whispered. "I know. It'll only end badly. I know that too. But Luca didn't finish the sentence. He kissed her again instead, harder this time, like he was trying to erase every careful boundary they'd built over the past 7 nights. His hands tangled in her hair, and Evelyn's back hit the wall behind her hard enough that breath left her lungs in a rush. She didn't care, couldn't care. Because for the first time since Preston destroyed her in front of 300 witnesses, she felt something other than humiliation burning through her veins. She felt wanted, not needed, not convenient. Wanted with the kind of desperation that made smart people stupid and careful people reckless. Luca pulled back just far enough to search her face. His pupils were blown wide and his breathing came ragged. "Tell me to stop." "No." "Evelyn, I said no." She grabbed the front of his shirt and pulled him back down. "I spent 7 nights learning how to be dangerous, so stop treating me like I'll break." Something dark and hungry flashed across his expression. Then his mouth was on hers again and coherent thought became impossible. His hands traced down her spine, finding the zipper of the midnight blue dress he'd chosen for her at the boutique. The sound of it sliding down felt obscenely loud in the silence of his penthouse. Cool air hit her bare skin. Then his hands followed, mapping every curve like he was memorizing her through touch alone. Evelyn's fingers fumbled with the buttons of his shirt until frustration won and she just yanked the fabric apart. Buttons scattered across expensive marble floors. She didn't apologize. Luca smiled against her mouth like he'd been waiting for her to stop being careful. He lifted her without warning, and she wrapped her legs around his waist on instinct. The dress pooled between them, silk and heat, and the kind of terrible decision that would change everything. "Bedroom," she managed between kisses. Luca carried her down the hall without breaking contact. His bedroom was exactly what she expected. Dark furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He laid her down like she was something precious, then braced himself above her with both arms. For 3 seconds, they just stared at each other. Last chance, Luca whispered. We crossed this line and there's no going back. Evelyn reached up and traced the scar through his eyebrow with her thumb. I don't want to go back. That was all the permission he needed. Mom. Evelyn woke to unfamiliar weight across her waist and sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize. Memory crashed back in fragments. The shipping yard, Dmitri's cold smile, the gun pressed to his forehead, Luca's confession in the living room, hands and mouths, and the absolute certainty that she'd just destroyed any chance of walking away from this unscathed. Luca's arm was wrapped around her waist, his chest pressed against her back, his breathing slow and even. Asleep. She'd never imagined Luca Devereaux slept. Seemed too human for someone who held guns to people's heads and negotiated with Russian arms dealers like discussing lunch plans. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. 17 missed calls. 43 text messages, most from numbers she didn't recognize, but 3 from a contact that made her stomach drop straight through the mattress. Preston. She grabbed the phone carefully, trying not to wake Luca. The messages loaded one by one, each worse than the last. We need to talk. This is important. Evelyn, please. I know you're angry, but you're making a mistake. That man is dangerous. I did some research. Luca Devereaux is connected to organized crime. He's going to get you killed. Please call me. Evelyn stared at the screen until the words blurred. Preston was worried about her. After abandoning her at the altar, after humiliating her in front of everyone she'd ever known, after replacing her within 72 hours, now he was worried. The urge to laugh felt slightly hysterical. She set the phone down and tried to slip out of bed without waking Luca. Failed. His arm tightened around her waist instantly and his eyes opened, alert and focused within seconds. No grogginess, no confusion, just immediate awareness. It's early. His voice was rough from sleep. Go back to bed. I should go home. Why? Good question. Because staying felt dangerous? Because waking up in Luca Devereaux's bed after sleeping with him crossed every line she'd promised herself she wouldn't cross? Because Preston's messages were right and she was making a catastrophic mistake? Because I have school tomorrow. Students. Lesson plans. Luca's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. He released her and sat up, the sheet pooling around his waist. Scars traced across his torso in harsh morning light, evidence of a life built from violence she couldn't begin to understand. Right, your real life. He stood and grabbed his pants from where they'd landed on the floor. I'll have Dante drive you. The dismissal was immediate, clinical. Like he'd flipped a switch and the man who'd kissed her until she couldn't breathe had disappeared behind walls built from self-preservation. Evelyn grabbed the dress from the floor and held it against her chest. Luca, don't. He pulled his pants on without looking at her. Last night was a mistake, we both know it, so let's just pretend it didn't happen and get back to the plan. 3 more nights of training and then the engagement party. After that, we're done. The words hit like a slap. A mistake, Evelyn repeated quietly. Yes. You kissed me. Multiple times. You said you were starting to care whether I survived. I lied. Luca finally looked at her and his expression was carved from ice. I say whatever I need to say to get what I want. You should know that by now. Shame burned through her chest so hot she thought it might leave scars. Of course he'd been lying. Because men like Luca Devereaux didn't actually care about elementary school teachers with broken engagements and desperation in their eyes. They used them, manipulated them, took what they wanted and discarded the rest. Just like Preston. Evelyn grabbed her shoes and walked toward the bedroom door on shaking legs. I'll find my own way home. Evelyn, she didn't stop, didn't look back. Just walked through his penthouse in a wrinkled evening dress at 7 in the morning and took the elevator down to street level. The doorman didn't blink at her walk of shame. Probably saw worse every weekend. Outside, the city was already awake. Coffee shops opening, commuters heading to work. Normal people living normal lives that didn't involve Russian arms dealers or criminal kingpins, or waking up in beds that smelled like expensive cologne and terrible decisions. Evelyn flagged a taxi and gave her address in a voice that didn't sound like hers. The driver didn't ask questions. Just drove while she stared out the window and tried not to think about the way Luca had looked at her right before calling it all a mistake. Her apartment felt suffocatingly small after the penthouse. Wedding gifts still sat stacked in the corner. Her laptop was open on the kitchen counter to lesson plans she'd abandoned a week ago. Everything exactly where she'd left it before deciding to become someone else. Except now she didn't know who that someone else was supposed to be. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a number she didn't recognize at all. The message was short, direct. Belmont Estate. Tonight, 8 p.m. Come alone or I tell everyone who you're really fucking. P. Preston. He'd somehow gotten a burner number to contact her, and he was demanding she meet him at the venue where his engagement party would happen in 2 days, threatening to expose her relationship with Luca if she didn't comply. Evelyn's hands shook as she read the message 3 more times. This was insane. Meeting Preston alone at night in an empty estate was the kind of thing that got people killed in movies. But the alternative was Preston standing up at his own engagement party and announcing to everyone that Evelyn Hart was sleeping with a known criminal. That would destroy the entire plan, make her look desperate and pathetic and exactly as broken as everyone already thought she was. She had 2 choices: go alone and face Preston's manipulation, or tell Luca and watch him turn the engagement party into a bloodbath. Neither option ended well. Evelyn looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back looked exhausted, haunted, like she'd aged 5 years and 7 nights. Stop apologizing for existing, she whispered to her reflection. You're dangerous now, remember? The words felt hollow, but she got dressed anyway, jeans, sweater, boots that could run if necessary. Left her phone on the counter in case Preston tried to track her. Called another taxi. The Belmont Estate sat 20 minutes outside the city on carefully manicured grounds that screamed old money and social registers. During the day, it probably looked beautiful. At night, with all the lights off, it looked like the kind of place people disappeared. The taxi dropped her at the front gate and drove away immediately. Evelyn stood in the darkness and seriously reconsidered every decision that led to this moment. Then she walked up the long driveway toward the main house. Gravel crunched under her boots. Security lights had been disabled. The only illumination came from a half-moon struggling through cloud cover. The front door was unlocked. She pushed it open slowly. Inside, the entrance hall stretched long and dark. Her footsteps echoed on marble floors. Preston? No answer. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. This was stupid, monumentally stupid. She should leave, should run back down the driveway and call Luca and let him handle this however he handled threats. But she'd already come this far. Light spilled from a room at the end of the hall. She walked toward it, every muscle tense to run. Preston sat in what looked like a library, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and furniture older than both of them combined. He stood when she entered. Still handsome, still put together. Still the man who'd promised forever and delivered humiliation instead. You came. You threatened me. Evelyn stopped 10 feet away from him. Say what you need to say so I can leave. Preston's expression twisted into something between concern and condescension. I'm trying to save your life. I don't need saving. Yes, you do. Evelyn, I know you're angry. I know I hurt you. But getting involved with Luca Devereaux isn't the answer. He took a step closer. He's dangerous. I've been doing research all week. He's connected to organized crime families up and down the East Coast. Money laundering, arms dealing, people who cross him disappear. I know what he is. Then why are you still seeing him? Preston's voice rose. Is this about revenge? About making me jealous? Because if it is, it worked. I see you, Evelyn. I see what you're doing and it's working. Evelyn went very still. What did you say? I made a mistake leaving you at the altar. I panicked. Got cold feet about marrying someone who'd never fit into my world. Preston moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, familiar and nauseating. But these past few days, watching you with him, seeing you in that restaurant looking like someone I didn't recognize, it made me realize what I threw away. He reached for her hand. Evelyn stepped back. Don't touch me. I'm trying to apologize. You're trying to manipulate me. The realization crashed over her like ice water. This whole thing, the burner number, the threats, demanding I meet you here alone. You're not worried about me. You're worried I actually moved on. Preston's expression flickered. That's not... Where's Senator Whitmore's daughter tonight, Preston? Does she know you're here begging your ex-fiancé to come back? His jaw tightened. This has nothing to do with hers. It has everything to do with her. Evelyn's voice was shaking, but she couldn't stop the words now that they'd started. You left me for someone more useful, someone who could advance your career, and now you're realizing that what we had was real, and what you have with her is just ambition wearing a diamond ring. Don't pretend you know anything about my relationship. I know you don't love her. Evelyn stepped closer, emboldened by anger that finally had somewhere to go. I know you're standing here trying to sabotage whatever I have with Luca because you can't stand watching me be happy with someone else. Preston grabbed her wrist hard enough to bruise. You're not happy. You're terrified. I can see it in your eyes. Let go of me. Not until you admit this whole thing with Devereaux is an act, that you're using him to make me jealous. His grip tightened. Tell me the truth, Evelyn. The door behind them slammed open. Both of them turned. Luca stood in the doorway wearing all black and an expression that promised violence. Dante loomed behind him holding a gun casually at his side. Preston released Evelyn's wrist instantly. Luca's eyes tracked the movement. Then he looked at Preston with the kind of focus predators gave prey right before striking. You have 3 seconds to explain why your hand was on her before I break every bone in it. This is none of your business. Preston tried to sound confident, failed. His voice shook on the last word. Everything involving Evelyn is my business. Luca crossed the library in 4 strides. Which is why I've had someone following her since she left my penthouse this morning. Shame flooded Evelyn's face. You were tracking me? Of course I was. Luca didn't look at her, kept his attention locked on Preston like a snake watching a mouse. Because I knew your ex-fiancé was too stupid to leave well enough alone. Preston backed up until he hit the bookshelf. I was trying to protect her from you. By threatening to expose her at your engagement party? By dragging her to a dark estate alone at night and putting your hands on her? Luca's voice was conversational. Pleasant. Absolutely terrifying. That's an interesting definition of protection. I love her. The words hung in the air like smoke. Evelyn's stomach turned over. No, you don't. I do. I made a mistake and I'm trying to fix it. Preston looked at her desperately. Come home with me, right now. We can fix this. Call off the engagement party. Go back to how things were before I ruined everything. Luca laughed. The sound was cold and sharp as broken glass. She's not going anywhere with you. That's her decision, not yours. You're right. Luca finally looked at Evelyn. His expression was completely unreadable. So let's ask her. All eyes turned to Evelyn. She stood in the center of the library with her wrist throbbing where Preston had grabbed her and her heart trying to escape through her ribs. 2 men staring at her waiting for an answer that would determine everything. Preston, who promised her forever and delivered humiliation. Luca, who called last night a mistake and tracked her movements like she was property to be monitored. Both of them treating her like something to be won or protected or controlled instead of a person capable of making her own decisions. Rage crystallized in her chest. Neither of you get to decide anything for me. Her voice came out steady, cold. Preston, you don't love me. You love the idea of winning, of making sure I stay broken and grateful while you move on to someone better. Well, I'm done being your backup plan. She turned to Luca. And you don't get to track me like I'm one of your criminal assets. I'm not your property. I'm not something you control. Luca's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Evelyn looked at Preston one final time. Stay away from me. Don't contact me. Don't show up at my apartment. Don't threaten me. If you do, I'll make sure Senator Whitmore knows exactly what kind of man his daughter is marrying. Preston's face went pale. You wouldn't try me. She walked toward the door. Dante stepped aside to let her pass. Behind her, she heard Luca's voice drop to something barely above a whisper. If you ever touch her again, I'll bury you so deep they'll need sonar to find the body. Understood? Preston didn't answer. Evelyn kept walking. Through the entrance hall, down the driveway, onto the dark road that led back toward the city. She had no phone, no way to call a taxi, just her rage and her boots, and the absolute certainty that she was done letting men make decisions about her life. A car pulled up beside her. The Mercedes. Dante leaned out the window. Get in. I'd rather walk. Boss says get in or he's carrying you. Evelyn looked back. Lucas stood at the end of the driveway watching her with an expression she couldn't read in the darkness. Every instinct screamed to keep walking, to put as much distance between herself and both men as physics allowed. But it was dark, and she was alone, and the road back to the city stretched 15 miles through nothing but woods and bad decisions. She got in the car. Dante drove in silence. Luca sat in the passenger seat. Nobody spoke for 10 minutes. Finally, Evelyn couldn't take it anymore. How long have you been tracking me? Since the second night. Luca's voice was flat. Dante's been following you everywhere, making sure you stayed safe. That's not protection. That's surveillance. Same thing in my world. Your world is insane. Yes. Luca turned in his seat to look at her. Which is why I told you this morning that last night was a mistake. Because you deserve someone normal, someone safe, someone who doesn't need to track your movements to make sure you're not getting threatened by desperate ex-fiancés in dark estates. Evelyn's throat tightened. You said you lied, that you were just using me. I lied about lying. His eyes searched her face. I do care whether you survive this. That's the problem. Because caring about people in my world gets them killed. Then why agree to help me in the first place? Luca was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because when you walked into my lounge 7 nights ago, I saw myself 10 years ago. Broken. Desperate. Willing to destroy myself just to prove I wasn't weak. His voice dropped. And I thought maybe if I could help you become strong enough to survive this, it would mean I survived for a reason. The confession hung between them like lightning before it struck. Evelyn's hand shook in her lap. What happened 10 years ago? Luca's expression went distant. My brother sold me out to the Volkov syndicate. They tortured me for 3 days trying to get information about my father's operations. When they were done, they dumped me in the harbor to drown. He touched the bullet wound scar on his shoulder absently. I survived, swam to shore, tracked down everyone involved, and made sure they understood what happens when you try to kill me. His eyes met hers, including my brother. Evelyn's breath caught. The shipping container. Yes, you killed your own family. I killed the people who betrayed me. Family is just DNA. Loyalty is choice. Luca's voice was empty. And when people prove they'll sacrifice you for power, you remove them before they get a second chance. The Mercedes pulled up outside Evelyn's apartment building. Dante put the car in park, but didn't kill the engine. Luca opened his door, then walked around and opened hers. Go inside, lock your doors. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. We finished the training. The engagement party is in 48 hours. After that, you never have to see me again. Evelyn climbed out on shaking legs. What if I don't want that? Want what? To never see you again. Luca's expression cracked, just for a second. Then the walls slammed back into place. You don't know what you want. You're traumatized and angry and looking for someone to make you feel powerful. I'm convenient, not permanent. That's not true. Yes, it is. He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. I'm a criminal, Evelyn. I've killed 17 people. I'll kill more before I die. And anyone who stands beside me becomes a target for every enemy I've ever made. His voice dropped to something raw. So go inside. Forget about last night. And when this is over, find someone who deserves you. He walked back to the Mercedes and climbed in. Dante pulled away from the curb, taillights disappearing into the night. Evelyn stood on the sidewalk staring at nothing until cold forced her inside. Her apartment felt like a stranger's space. She sat on the edge of her bed and tried to process the past 12 hours. Waking up in Luca's bed, his dismissal, Preston's manipulation, the library confrontation, Luca's confession about his brother. Everything was spinning out of control so fast she couldn't find solid ground. Her laptop sat open on the kitchen counter, still logged into her email. 3 new messages since this morning. The first was from her principal asking if she needed more time off. The second was from Preston's mother apologizing for her son's behavior and begging Evelyn to reconsider. The third was from an address she didn't recognize. No subject line. She opened it. A video file. No message. Just the file and a send time of 20 minutes ago. Evelyn's hands trembled as she clicked play. The video was grainy. Security camera footage. It took her 3 seconds to recognize the location. Obsidian Lounge, the night she first met Luca. The camera showed her walking through the door soaking wet. Showed Dante stopping her. Showed Luca gesture for her to approach his table. But it also showed something else. Showed Luca pull out his phone before she even sat down and text someone. The timestamp was visible. 2 minutes before their conversation started. The video jumped forward. Different camera, different angle. This one showed the hallway outside the lounge. Preston walking down it wearing different clothes. Meeting with someone in a dark suit Evelyn didn't recognize. Shaking hands. Exchanging something that looked like an envelope. The video jumped again. Back to the lounge interior. Luca watching Evelyn leave. Pulling out his phone again. Texting the same number. Then a final cut. Text messages overlaid on black screen. Phone number redacted, but conversation crystal clear. She took the bait. Exactly like you said. Good. Keep me updated. The plan depends on timing. How much did Calloway pay for this? Enough that bankrupting him afterward will be satisfying. Evelyn's vision blurred. She watched the video 3 more times hoping she was wrong. Hoping she'd misunderstood. But the evidence was right there in black and white. Preston had hired Luca to manipulate her. Paid him to help her. To train her. To make her trust him. Also, Preston could what? Swoop in at the last minute and play hero? Prove to Senator Whitmore's daughter that Evelyn was unstable and desperate? Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Did you watch it? Preston's voice carried smug satisfaction. I've had a private investigator following Devereaux all week. Cost me $50,000, but it was worth it to prove I was right. Evelyn couldn't breathe. You hired him? Of course I did. Think about it, Evelyn. Why would a man like Luca Devereaux agree to help a nobody school teacher for a ring worth $4,000? He wouldn't, unless someone paid him to. Preston's laugh was cruel. I wanted to see how far you'd sink, how desperate you really were, and you didn't disappoint. Why? Because breaking off our engagement cost me. Senator Whitmore demanded I prove you were unstable before he'd bless my relationship with his daughter. So I created the evidence. His voice dropped. You sleeping with a known criminal, getting involved in organized crime, threatening me tonight in front of witnesses. All of it documented. All of it perfect ammunition to make sure everyone knows you're exactly as broken as I said you were. Evelyn's hand shook so hard she nearly dropped the phone. You're lying. Watch the video again. Luca's been playing you from the start. The training, the dinners, the protection. All of it was performance. I paid him $100,000 to help you just long enough that destroying you afterward would hurt worse. Preston's satisfaction was audible. And judging by the way you defended him tonight, I'd say it worked perfectly. The line went dead. Evelyn stood in the center of her apartment with the video still playing on repeat on her laptop screen. Evidence of the worst betrayal imaginable staring back at her in time-stamped clarity. Luca had been lying all along. Everything he said, everything he did, the careful touches and the training and the confession about his brother, all of it calculated manipulation paid for by the man who left her at the altar. She'd been a job. Nothing more. Her phone buzzed. Text from another unknown number. Tomorrow night. One final training session before the engagement party. Don't be late. L. Rage crystallized in her chest, so pure it burned away everything else. Fear, shame, heartbreak, all of it consumed by white-hot fury. Luca Devereaux thought he could manipulate her, thought he could play hero while collecting Preston's money, thought she was too broken to fight back. He was wrong. Evelyn had spent 8 nights learning from a monster how to survive in a world built to destroy her. Learning how to lie, how to weaponize confidence, how to walk into rooms full of predators without looking like prey. Well, tomorrow night she'd show him exactly how good a student she'd been. She opened her laptop and started typing. An email to the one person who might actually help her burn everything down. Dmitri Volkov, the Russian arms dealer who'd shaken hands with Luca in a shipping container while guards painted them both with laser sights. The man who respected steel spines and women who didn't run. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Mr. Volkov, you said women who stand beside monsters are rare. I stood beside one for 8 nights. Now I need to destroy him. If you're interested in eliminating competition while making $100,000 in the process, meet me tomorrow night. Midnight. The warehouse on Pier 47. I have information about Luca Devereaux's operations. Security vulnerabilities. Financial weak points. Everything you need to take him apart piece by piece. In exchange, I want protection for exactly 24 hours. Long enough to walk into Preston Calloway's engagement party, expose both of them, and disappear before the consequences catch up. If you're not interested, delete this email and forget I exist. If you are, I'll see you tomorrow. She hit send before courage could fail. Then she pulled out the midnight blue dress from the boutique, laid it across her bed, and stared at it until her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Tomorrow night, Luca would expect the broken teacher desperate for his approval. Instead, he'd get the monster he created. And by the time she was finished, both men who thought they could control her would understand what it actually meant to cross Evelyn Hart, even if it killed her in the process. Dmitri Volkov's response arrived at 3 in the morning. Pier 47. Midnight. Come alone. If this is trap, you die first. Evelyn stared at the glowing screen until her eyes burned. No going back now. She'd invited a Russian arms dealer into her plan for revenge, a man who killed people for sport and negotiated peace agreements with guns pressed to foreheads. But Luca had taught her something valuable over the past 8 nights. Sometimes the only way to fight a monster was to become something worse. She spent the day preparing, called in sick to school, withdrew $300 from her already bleeding bank account, bought a burner phone from a convenience store 3 blocks from her apartment. Every action felt mechanical, distant, like watching someone else make catastrophically bad decisions while she floated somewhere above her body screaming warnings nobody could hear. At 7:45, Dante's Mercedes pulled up outside her building. Evelyn grabbed the backpack she'd packed, change of clothes, the flash drive with Preston's investigators' video evidence, and her grandmother's ring still in its velvet box. Everything she owned that mattered fit in 12 pounds of canvas and denial. She climbed into the Mercedes without looking at Dante. He drove toward the warehouse in silence. The city lights blurred past her window like evidence of a world that kept spinning while hers imploded. Normal people heading to dinner, couples laughing on sidewalks, everyone living lives that didn't involve betrayal and Russian criminals and plans that would either save her or get her killed. The warehouse loomed ahead, all dark windows, an industrial menace. Evelyn's hands trembled as Dante parked. "Where's Luca?" "Inside. Waiting." Dante's expression was unreadable. "You good?" No, she was the furthest thing from good. She was an elementary school teacher about to walk into a warehouse and face the man who'd been manipulating her for $100,000 while she fell for every word out of his mouth. "I'm fine." Dante's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't believe her, but he opened her door anyway. The warehouse was lit like always, harsh fluorescent overhead, boxing ring in the center, equipment along the walls. Luca stood in the ring wearing black pants and a tight shirt that showed every scar she'd traced with her fingers 2 nights ago. Her stomach twisted. He looked up when she entered. His expression was carefully neutral. "You're late. Traffic." The lie tasted like ash. Luca studied her face for 3 seconds too long. "Are you all right?" Perfect question. How was she supposed to answer? That she'd watched security footage of him accepting money to destroy her? That Preston had hired him to play hero while documenting her breakdown? That in 4 hours she had a meeting with a Russian arms dealer that would either save her life or end it? "I'm fine. Let's just get this over with." Something flickered across Luca's expression. Concern, maybe. Or guilt. Hard to tell when every word out of his mouth had been carefully calculated performance. Tonight, we work on crisis management. How to handle unexpected situations. How to improvise when plans fall apart. He gestured for her to enter the ring. "Because tomorrow night at that engagement party, anything could happen, and I need to know you can adapt without falling apart." Evelyn climbed through the ropes on legs that barely held her weight. Her backpack stayed near the edge of the ring, close enough to grab if she needed to run. Luca circled her slowly. First scenario. Someone at the party recognizes me, calls me out publicly, accuses me of criminal activity in front of 300 witnesses. What do? Deny it. How? Laugh it off. Say they're confusing you with someone else. Imply they're drunk or jealous or trying to cause drama. The words came easily. She'd learned from the best liar she'd ever met. Good. Second scenario. Preston corners you alone, tries to convince you to leave with him. What do you do? Evelyn's jaw tightened. Tell him to go to hell. Not good enough. You need an exit strategy that doesn't make a scene. Luca stopped circling. Try again. I'd signal you. Let you extract me before it escalates. Better? He moved closer. Third scenario. I kiss you in front of everyone, make a public claim that you're mine. How do you react? Heat flooded her face. The memory of his mouth on hers 2 nights ago crashed back in vivid detail. I'd kiss you back. Why? Because that's what we've been practicing. That's the whole point of this performance. Her voice came out sharper than intended. Making everyone believe we're real. Luca's eyes searched her face. Are we still performing? The question hung between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The moment she could confront him, throw Preston's evidence in his face and watch him try to lie his way out of documentation stamped with timestamps and banking records. But Dmitri's meeting was in 4 hours. If she confronted Luca now, he'd lock her in this warehouse until she told him everything. Would torture the truth out of her if necessary. She'd watched him hold a gun to Dmitri's forehead without flinching. Extracting information from one elementary school teacher would take him 30 seconds. So she swallowed the truth and fed him the lie he expected. I don't know. Luca stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne and see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. I need you to know something before tomorrow night. What? Everything I told you was true. About my brother. About surviving the Volkov syndicate. About caring whether you survive this. His voice dropped lower. I wasn't lying when I said last night was a mistake, but not because I didn't want it, because I wanted it too much. Evelyn's throat tightened. He sounded so sincere, so raw, exactly like a man confessing genuine feelings instead of delivering lines written in a contract signed with Preston's money. Why are you telling me this? Because after tomorrow night, you're walking away from all of this. From me. From the danger. And I need you to understand that letting you go is the hardest thing I've done in 10 years. Luca's hand came up and curved against her jaw. But I'm doing it anyway because you deserve better than standing beside a monster for the rest of your life. Tears burned behind Evelyn's eyes. She hated that his touch still made her breath catch. Hated that part of her wanted to believe every word. Hated that Preston had destroyed her ability to trust anything real. I should go. She stepped back before his proximity could break her completely. I need to prepare for tomorrow. Evelyn, I'll be ready. 8 o'clock. The engagement party. She grabbed her backpack and climbed out of the ring. Don't be late. She walked out of this warehouse before he could stop her, before the tears threatening to spill could give her away. Before she did something catastrophically stupid, like tell him the truth and watch him confirm every terrible thing Preston claimed. Outside, Dante leaned against the Mercedes. Need a ride? No, I'll walk. It's 2 miles to your apartment. I need the air. Dante's expression suggested he knew she was lying but wasn't paid enough to argue. Suit yourself. Evelyn walked, not toward her apartment, toward the docks, toward Pier 47, where salvation or destruction waited in the form of a Russian criminal who'd shaken hands with the man who broke her. The city felt different at night, sharper, meaner, like it had finally dropped the pretense of civilization and admitted what it really was. Concrete and greed and people hurting each other in increasingly creative ways. She reached Pier 47 at 11:45 BT. The warehouse squatted at the end of a long dock surrounded by shipping containers and equipment that hadn't moved in years. No lights, no guards visible, just darkness and the sound of water lapping against wooden pylons. Evelyn checked the burner phone. No messages. She walked toward this warehouse on legs that trembled with every step. This was insane. She was meeting a Russian arms dealer alone at midnight with nothing but rage and a flash drive full of evidence. If Dmitri decided she was more useful dead than alive, nobody would find her body for weeks. But she'd come too far to stop now. The warehouse door hung open 6 inches. Evelyn pushed it wider and stepped inside. Emergency lighting cast everything in sickly green. The space was empty except for a metal table in the center and 2 chairs. Dmitri sat in one smoking a cigarette like he'd been there for hours. Miss Hart, punctual. I appreciate this. He gestured to the empty chair. Sit. Evelyn sat. Her backpack stayed on her lap like a shield. Dmitri studied her face with the same calculating focus she'd seen in the shipping container. You look different than night I met you, less afraid, more angry. Anger is good, makes people do interesting things. You said if this was a trap, I'd die first. Yes, but you came anyway. This tells me you are either very brave or very stupid. He stubbed out a cigarette and immediately lit another. So which is it? Desperate. Dmitri laughed. Honest. Even better. He leaned back in his chair. Your email says you have information about Luca Devereaux's operations, security vulnerabilities, financial weak points. This interests me very much. But first, you tell me why. He's been lying to me, using me, taking money from my ex-fiancée to manipulate me into trusting him. Evelyn pulled the flash drive from her backpack and set it on the table. Everything's on here, security footage, banking records, text messages between Luca and Preston. All of it proves he's been playing me from the start. Dmitri picked up the flash drive and turned it over in his fingers. And you want revenge. I want protection. 24 hours. Long enough to walk into Preston Calloway's engagement party tomorrow night, expose both of them in front of everyone they know, and disappear before the consequences catch me. And in exchange, everything on that drive, plus information about Luca's harbor operations, guard rotations, shipment schedules, secondary locations Dante mentioned when you hit his primary warehouse. Evelyn's voice was steady, despite her hands shaking. Everything you need to take him apart. Dmitri was quiet for a long moment. Then he plugged the flash drive into a laptop that appeared from beneath the table. His eyes scanned the screen while he smoked. Evelyn's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack ribs. Finally, Dmitri looked up. His expression was unreadable. This is very interesting, but also very problematic. Why? Because half of this evidence is fabricated. He turned the laptop so she could see the screen. These banking records? Fake. The timestamps don't match transaction logs. The text messages? Spoofed numbers, easy to create if you know what you're doing. Evelyn's vision blurred. That's not possible. It is very possible when someone wants to manipulate you into believing something that serves their agenda. Dmitri's eyes were cold. Your ex-fiancé did not hire Luca Devereaux. He hired private investigator to create evidence that looks real, but falls apart under scrutiny. And you believed it because you wanted reason to stop trusting man who makes you feel things you are afraid of feeling. No, I watched the video. Saw Preston pay someone. You saw what investigator wanted you to see. Carefully edited footage designed to make you doubt Luca enough that you would do something stupid. Dmitri gestured around the empty warehouse. Like this. Horror crawled up Evelyn's spine. You're lying. Why would I lie? You came here offering me information to destroy my competition. If evidence was real, I would take it happily and eliminate Luca Devereaux within the week. He closed the laptop with careful precision. But I do not build operations on fabricated intelligence. That gets people killed. Evelyn's hands shook so hard she had to press them flat against the table. Preston said, Preston Calloway is desperate man trying to sabotage your life because he cannot stand watching you become someone he no longer controls. Dmitri's voice was almost gentle. So he created evidence, sent it to you knowing you would react exactly this way. And now you are here, betraying man who has been protecting you because you believed lies wrapped in timestamps and banking records. The warehouse spun. Evelyn's chest felt too tight to breathe. She'd been wrong, catastrophically, irreversibly wrong. Preston hadn't hired Luca. The evidence was fake, which meant everything Luca told her about his brother, about caring, about letting her go because she deserved better, was real. And she'd just sold him out to a Russian arms dealer based on fabricated intel. I need to leave. Evelyn grabbed her backpack and stood on legs that barely functioned. Dmitri stood too. Where are you going? To fix this, to warn Luca, to... Her voice cracked. I don't know, but I can't stay here. Sit down, Miss Hart. The command in his voice made her freeze. Dmitri walked around the table slowly. You think I let you leave after you walked into my warehouse offering intelligence about competitor? After you brought me flash drive with fabricated evidence that could be traced back to me if used incorrectly. He smiled, cold, predatory. No. You stay here until I decide what to do with you. Terror flooded Evelyn's veins. You said you respected women who didn't run. I do. But respect does not mean freedom. Dmitri pulled out his phone and made a call in rapid Russian. Then he looked at Evelyn with something almost like pity. You made very large mistake coming here alone. Now you pay consequences. The warehouse door slammed open. 4 men in tactical gear entered with automatic weapons. Evelyn's backpack fell from numb fingers. This was it. She was going to die in an abandoned warehouse because she believed lies designed to destroy her. Because she let rage overrule logic. Because she was exactly as stupid as Preston always claimed. One of the guards grabbed her arm. Then gunfire erupted. The warehouse exploded into chaos. Guards dropped like puppets with cut strings. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness in strobe light bursts. Evelyn hit the floor and covered her head with both arms while bullets ripped through metal and concrete around her. Through the noise, she heard Dante's voice. Clear left! More gunfire. Screaming in Russian, the wet sound of bodies hitting concrete. Then silence. Evelyn's ears rang. She couldn't hear anything except her own heartbeat thundering against her ribs. Hands grabbed her shoulders and she screamed, It's me! You're safe! Luca. She looked up through tears and smoke. He knelt beside her wearing tactical gear and an expression carved from absolute fury. Blood spattered across his face and chest, but none of it looked like his. Are you hurt? His hands moved over her, frantically checking for wounds. No, how did you... Dante's been tracking you all day. Saw you head toward the docks instead of your apartment. Called me immediately. Luca's jaw was so tight, it looked like bone might crack through skin. What the hell were you thinking coming here alone? Evelyn's vision blurred with tears. Preston sent me evidence, video footage, banking records. It showed you taking money from him to manipulate me. Luca went very still. And you believed it? Yes. So you came here to sell me out to Dmitri Volkov based on fabricated intelligence you didn't bother verifying. His voice was flat, empty. You trusted lies over everything I told you. I'm sorry, I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't ask. Luca stood and turned away. Dante, get her out of here. Wait. Evelyn struggled to her feet. Luca, please. I don't want to hear it. He still wouldn't look at her. You made your choice. You chose to believe I was exactly what everyone warned you about, instead of giving me a chance to explain. I was wrong. I know that now. Dmitri showed me the evidence was fake, and You had to hear it from him before you'd believe me. Luca finally turned around, and the pain in his eyes was devastating. Do you have any idea what that means? That you trusted a Russian arms dealer over me? Evelyn's throat closed. I was scared. Of what? Of how I feel about you. Of what it means that I chose you over everything safe and normal. Of... Her voice broke. Of being wrong again. Of trusting someone who was just using me like Preston did. I'm not Preston. Luca's voice was quiet, deadly. I've killed people who betrayed me. Buried them in places nobody will ever find. But I have never lied to you about who I am or what I want. Never pretended to be something I'm not. And the fact that you couldn't see the difference tells me everything I need to know. He walked toward the warehouse door. Evelyn followed. Where are you going? To the engagement party. Like we planned. He stopped at the threshold and glanced back. You're coming with me. We're finishing this. And then we're done. Luca, get in the car, Evelyn, or I'll leave you here to explain to Dmitri why his men are dead. She looked around the warehouse. 4 bodies sprawled across concrete in pools of blood that looked black under emergency lighting. Dmitri was gone. Disappeared during the firefight like smoke. The laptop with the fabricated evidence sat on the table like a monument to her catastrophic judgment. Dante appeared at her elbow. Boss says move. Evelyn grabbed her backpack and followed him outside. A black SUV idled at the end of the pier with Luca already in the passenger seat. She climbed into the back. Nobody spoke during the drive to Belmont Estate. Evelyn stared out the window, watching the city blur past, and tried to figure out how to fix what she'd broken. But every scenario ended the same way. with Luca walking away and her standing alone surrounded by the wreckage of her own terrible decisions. The Belmont estate blazed with lights. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Security guards in expensive suits checked invitations at the entrance. Through the windows, she could see the ballroom packed with guests in evening wear drinking champagne and celebrating Preston's engagement to someone who wasn't her. The SUV stopped at the edge of the property. Luca turned in his seat to look at Evelyn. His expression was cold, controlled. The monster everyone warned her about, fully visible beneath the surface. Here's how this works. We walk in together. You smile and play the devoted girlfriend for exactly 2 hours. When I give the signal, you tell Preston and everyone in that ballroom exactly what kind of man he is. Then we leave and you never contact me again. Understood? Evelyn's chest felt like someone had reached inside and crushed her heart with both hands. What if I don't want that? What you want stopped mattering the second you chose to believe lies over me. Luca's voice was brutal in its honesty. So yes or no? Are you doing this or not? She had 2 choices. Walk away right now. Disappear into the night and let Preston win. Let everyone believe she was exactly as broken as he claimed. Or walk into that ballroom on Luca's arm one final time and burn everything down, even if it meant losing the only person who'd ever made her feel dangerous. Evelyn grabbed the midnight blue dress from her backpack. Give me 5 minutes to change. Luca's expression didn't change. You have 3. She climbed out of the SUV and changed behind a row of hedges that probably cost more than her car. The silk slid over her skin like a promise she'd already broken. Her hand shook as she zipped it up. When she walked back to the SUV, Luca was waiting outside wearing a tailored black suit that made him look like death wrapped in Italian wool. He'd cleaned the blood from his face, fixed his hair, transformed back into the charming billionaire facade he wore like armor. He offered his arm without a word. Evelyn took it. They walked up the marble steps toward the entrance. Security guards checked their names against a list and waved them through. Music and laughter spilled from the ballroom ahead, hundreds of people who had no idea they were about to watch a massacre. Luca's hand pressed against the small of her back. The touch was familiar, possessive, exactly what they'd practiced for 8 nights. But his eyes were dead when he looked at her. Remember, smile, play the part, and when I give the signal, burn it all down. His voice was barely above a whisper. Make them remember, make them regret, and never ever let them see you flinch. They stepped into the ballroom together. Every conversation died instantly. 300 faces turned to stare at Evelyn Hart, the woman who'd been abandoned at the altar 10 days ago, standing beside Luca Devereaux, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent and an expression that promised violence. Preston stood near the front of the ballroom with Senator Whitmore's daughter on his arm. His face went pale the instant he saw them. Luca's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Shall we dance? He pulled Evelyn onto the dance floor before she could answer. His hand settled at her waist. Hers rested on his shoulder. They moved together like they'd done this 1,000 times instead of never. Around them, whispers crashed like waves. Is that Luca Devereaux? The criminal? What is she doing with him? I heard Preston tried to warn her. Luca's eyes stayed locked on hers while they danced. But there was no warmth there. No forgiveness. Just cold calculation and the absolute certainty that this was the last time he'd ever touch her. I'm sorry, Evelyn whispered. I know. I was wrong to believe Preston. I know that too. Then why won't you forgive me? Luca's grip tightened slightly at her waist. Because forgiveness means trusting you not to do it again. And I can't afford that risk. Tears burned behind Evelyn's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of 300 people watching her every move. The song ended. Luca stepped back and turned to face the ballroom. His voice carried across the sudden silence like a blade. Can I have everyone's attention, please? Every head turned. Preston started moving toward them. This is a private event. I'm aware. Luca's smile was predatory. But since your fiancé was kind enough to invite us, I thought it would be rude not to make a toast. He grabbed a champagne flute from a passing server. To Preston Calloway, a man who throws away diamonds because he's too stupid to recognize value when it's standing right in front of him. Shocked silence rippled through the ballroom. Preston's face went red. Get out, both of you. We will, but first, Evelyn has something she'd like to share. Luca turned to her. His expression was empty. The floor is yours. This was it. The moment she'd been preparing for since walking into Obsidian Lounge 9 nights ago. Every lesson Luca taught her, every hour of training, every time he pushed her to be dangerous instead of broken, all of it led here. Evelyn stepped forward. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't waver. She looked at Preston and saw him exactly as he was. A coward who'd tried to destroy her because he couldn't stand watching her become someone he no longer controlled. 10 days ago, Preston Calloway left me at the altar in front of 300 people. Her voice carried across the ballroom with devastating clarity. He told everyone I was a mistake, that he'd found someone better. Then he spent the next week trying to sabotage my life because he couldn't handle the fact that I moved on. Preston's hands curled into fists. That's not... He hired a private investigator to fabricate evidence, making it look like Luca was manipulating me. Sent me doctored security footage and fake banking records designed to make me doubt the one person who'd been honest with me from the start. Evelyn's eyes swept the ballroom. All so he could play hero. So he could prove to Senator Whitmore that I was unstable and his engagement to someone else was justified. Senator Whitmore's expression went cold as winter. Preston grabbed Evelyn's wrist. You're lying! Luca's hand shot out and caught Preston's arm with enough force to make him gasp. Touch her again, and I'll break every bone in your hand. Slowly. Security guards started moving toward them. Luca released Preston and straightened his jacket. We're leaving, but before we go, I want everyone here to understand something. His eyes swept the ballroom like he was memorizing every face. Evelyn Hart walked into my lounge 9 nights ago with nothing but a ring and shattered pride. And in that time, she became the most dangerous woman I've ever met. Not because I taught her, because she chose to stop apologizing for existing. He looked at Preston with absolute contempt. You threw away something irreplaceable, and you'll spend the rest of your life knowing it. Luca offered his arm to Evelyn one final time. She took it. They walked out of the ballroom together while 300 people watched in stunned silence, down the marble steps, past the luxury cars and security guards, into the night that smelled like rain and endings. The SUV waited at the edge of the property. Luca opened the door for her. Dante will take you wherever you want to go. Evelyn turned to face him. What about you? I have things to handle. People to pay for trying to manipulate you. Business that doesn't concern you anymore. His expression was carved from stone. Goodbye, Evelyn. He turned to walk away. Evelyn grabbed his arm. Wait. There's nothing left to say. Yes, there is. Her voice cracked, but she forced the words out anyway. I love you. Luca went very still. Behind them, chaos erupted. Preston burst through the estate doors shouting. Security guards followed. Senator Whitmore's angry voice cut through the night, demanding explanations. But Evelyn didn't look away from Luca's face. I love you, she said again. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I broke your trust. But I'm not walking away without telling you that these past 9 nights changed everything. You saw me when nobody else did, made me dangerous when everyone else wanted me small, and I... Gunfire shattered the night. Evelyn screamed. Luca threw her to the ground and covered her body with his as bullets ripped through the air around them. The SUV's windows exploded. Dante returned fire from behind the vehicle. More gunfire erupted from the tree line. Dmitri's voice cut through the chaos in accented English. You killed my men, Devereaux. Now I kill everything you care about. Luca rolled off Evelyn and pulled a gun from his ankle holster in one smooth motion. Stay down! He rose to a crouch and fired 3 precise shots toward the trees. Someone screamed. Dmitri's voice shouted orders in Russian. Evelyn's ears rang. Blood pounded through her veins so hard she thought they might burst. This was her fault. She'd gone to Dmitri, given him reason to retaliate. And now people were dying because she couldn't tell the difference between truth and lies. A bullet struck the ground 3 inches from her head. Luca grabbed her arm and hauled her toward the SUV. Move! They ran. Bullets chased them across manicured lawns. Dante laid down covering fire while Luca shoved Evelyn into the back seat. Then the world exploded. The SUV's front end erupted in flames. Dante dove away from the blast. Luca hit the ground and rolled. Evelyn's vision whited out from the concussive force. When she could see again, the SUV was burning. Dante lay motionless 20 feet away, and Luca was fighting hand-to-hand with two of Dmitri's men while blood poured from a gash across his forehead. Evelyn crawled out of the burning vehicle on hands and knees. Her dress was torn, her ears still rang, but her hands found something solid in the grass. A gun. Dante's backup weapon must have fallen during the blast. She picked it up with shaking hands. Luca had taught her the basics 8 nights ago. Safety off. Aim center mass. Squeeze. Don't pull. One of Dmitri's men raised his weapon toward Luca's back. Evelyn didn't think, just aimed and fired. The recoil nearly broke her wrist. The shot went wide, but it was close enough that the man turned toward her instead. His gun swung in her direction. Luca moved faster than physics should allow. He broke the first man's neck with his bare hands, grabbed the second man's weapon, and put 3 rounds through his chest before he could fire at Evelyn. Both bodies dropped. Sirens screamed in the distance. Luca ran toward Evelyn and grabbed her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" "No, Dante, I'll get him. You need to run, now." "I'm not leaving you." "Evelyn?" "No!" She grabbed his jacket with both hands. "I'm done running. Done letting people fight my battles. Done apologizing for choosing you." Her voice was fierce, desperate. "So either we both leave or we both stay. But I'm not walking away. Not again. Not ever." Luca stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Then Dmitri stepped out of the tree line holding an automatic rifle aimed directly at them both. "How touching," he said. "Love in the face of death. Very American." His smile was cold. "Now you both die together. How romantic." His finger tightened on the trigger. The shot never came. A voice cut through the night from behind Dmitri, cold, female, and absolutely lethal. "Drop the weapon or I paint the grass with your brain matter." Dmitri froze. A woman stepped out of the shadows holding a sniper rifle aimed at his head. She was maybe 30, dark hair pulled back severe, wearing tactical gear that suggested military training. Her eyes were ice blue and completely devoid of mercy. "Katya." Dmitri's voice was carefully neutral. "This does not concern you." "Actually, it does. Luca Devereaux has information I need about the Marseille shipment routes. He dies. That information dies with him." She moved closer, rifle never wavering. "So you're going to lower your weapon, call off your men, and disappear before I decide killing you is worth the paperwork. We had agreement. I help you with French operations. You stay out of my East Coast business. And you broke that agreement the second you started a war with Devereaux on American soil during a high-profile event with witnesses and police sirens." Katya's smile was sharp enough to cut. "So new agreement. You leave. He lives. And nobody has to explain to our mutual associates why you started a territorial dispute that draws federal attention we can't afford." Dmitri's finger stayed on the trigger for 3 more seconds. Then he lowered the rifle with deliberate slowness. "This is not finished, Devereaux." "Yes, it is." Luca's voice was flat, final. "Because if you come after me or anyone I care about again, Katya won't be the only one who wants you dead. Every operation you run, every shipment you move, every contact you have, I'll burn it all down until there's nothing left but ashes and arrest warrants." Dmitri studied Luca's face for a long moment. Then he looked at Evelyn, still clutching Dante's gun with white-knuckled hands. "You chose well. Woman with steel spine and enough loyalty to shoot at trained killers for you." He nodded once. "Respect." He turned and walked back into the trees. His remaining men melted into darkness behind him. Katya lowered her rifle and looked at Luca. "You owe me." "I know." "Marseille routes, full logistics, by end of week." "Done." She disappeared into the night like she'd never existed. Sirens were getting closer. Red and blue lights flashed through the trees at the end of the long driveway. Luca grabbed Evelyn's hand and pulled her toward where Dante lay motionless. Blood pooled beneath his head from where he'd hit the ground during the blast, but his chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Luca pressed 2 fingers to his neck, checking for pulse. He's alive. Concussed, but alive. He looked up at Evelyn. "Can you walk?" "Yes." "Then we need to move. Now." "The police will arrest us both if we're here when they arrive. Me for weapons charges. You for discharging a firearm at a public event." Luca stood and grabbed Dante under the arms. "There's a service road behind the estate. Help me get him there. Evelyn grabbed Dante's legs. Together they carried him across manicured lawns toward the tree line. Her arms screamed. Her dress tore further with every step. But she didn't stop until they reached a narrow dirt road where a nondescript sedan sat waiting. The driver's window rolled down. An older man with gray hair and sharp eyes looked out. Situation? Compromised. Dmitri's men engaged. Dante's down. Need immediate extraction. Luca opened the back door and they loaded Dante into the seat. Take him to the safe house. Get medical there. Tell them head trauma and possible internal bleeding. The driver nodded once and the sedan disappeared down the service road. Luca turned to Evelyn. Blood still dripped from the gash across his forehead. His suit was torn and dirty. He looked like he'd fought a war and barely survived. We need to keep moving. My second vehicle is parked 2 blocks from here. He started walking. Evelyn followed on legs that barely held her weight. Adrenaline was crashing hard now. Her hands shook. Her vision blurred at the edges. Everything that happened in the past 2 hours felt simultaneously hyper-real and completely impossible. They reached a black sedan parked on a residential street. Luca unlocked it and they climbed in. He drove without speaking while Evelyn pressed her forehead against the cool window glass and tried to stop shaking. 10 minutes later, they pulled into an underground garage beneath a building she didn't recognize. Luca parked in a spot marked reserved and killed the engine. Silence settled between them, heavy enough to crush bone. Whose car was that? Evelyn finally asked. The one that took Dante? Cleanup crew. People I pay to handle situations when things go wrong. Luca's voice was flat, exhausted. They'll make sure the Belmont estate footage disappears. Make sure the police investigation focuses on Dmitri's men instead of us. Make sure nobody connects you to gunfire at a senator's daughter's engagement party. Why? Because I told you 9 nights ago that if you stood beside me, you'd become a target for every enemy I've ever made. And I was right. He turned to look at her finally. But I underestimated how far you'd go to protect me anyway. Evelyn's throat tightened. You were going to die. And you shot at a trained killer with a gun you'd held exactly once before to stop it. Something that might have been pain flickered across his expression. That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do. I learned from the best. Luca's laugh was dark and broken. I taught you how to survive, not how to throw your life away for someone who doesn't deserve it. That's not your decision to make. Yes, it is. Because everyone who gets close to me ends up dead or destroyed. My brother, my father, every person who thought loyalty meant something in my world. His hands gripped the steering wheel hard enough that knuckles went white. I won't add you to that list. Evelyn reached across the center console and covered his hand with hers. What if I'm willing to take that risk? Then you're as insane as I am. Good. We'll be insane together. Luca stared at their joined hands for a long moment. Then he pulled away and opened his door. Come on, we need to get cleaned up and figure out what happens next. They took an elevator to the 15th floor. The apartment was smaller than his penthouse. 1 bedroom, minimal furniture, the kind of space designed for functionality instead of comfort. A safe house. Luca disappeared into the bathroom and returned with a first aid kit. He set it on the kitchen counter and gestured for Evelyn to sit. Let me see your hands. She held them out. Her palms were scraped raw from hitting the ground. Her wrist was already bruising where Preston had grabbed her what felt like a lifetime ago. Luca cleaned the scrapes with antiseptic that burned like fire. His touch was clinical, professional. Like he was treating an asset instead of someone who'd confessed love to him 20 minutes before gunfire erupted. When he finished, Evelyn grabbed the antiseptic and a clean cloth. Your turn. That gash needs stitches. It's fine. Sit down, Luca. He sat. Let her clean the blood from his forehead and examine the wound. It wasn't as deep as it looked, but it would definitely scar. She pressed gauze against it until the bleeding slowed. You need a hospital. Can't risk it. Gunshot residue on my hands. Questions I can't answer. He caught her wrist gently when she reached for butterfly bandages. I'll handle it. His eyes met hers, and the exhaustion there was devastating. This wasn't the cold criminal who'd held a gun to Dmitri's head. This was someone who'd fought too many battles and was running out of reasons to keep surviving them. I'm sorry, Evelyn whispered. For all of it. For believing Preston's lies. For going to Dmitri. For... Stop apologizing. Luca's voice was rough. You were manipulated by someone who spent 10 days studying your vulnerabilities and exploiting them. That's not your fault. I should have trusted you. Why? I'm a criminal who kills people for crossing me, a man who lives in violence and calls it business. You had every reason not to trust me. His jaw tightened, but you did it anyway, and that terrifies me more than anything Dmitri could do. Why? Because it means I'm starting to believe I could be someone different, someone worth trusting, someone who deserves. He stopped, dragged both hands through his hair. This is insane. You should leave. Go back to your apartment and your normal life and forget any of this happened. Evelyn stood and moved to stand between his knees, forced him to look at her. What if I don't want a normal life anymore? Then you're going to get hurt. I'm already hurt. Preston made sure of that when he destroyed me in front of 300 people. Her voice was steady despite tears threatening to spill. But you showed me how to turn that pain into power, how to be dangerous instead of broken. And I'm not giving that up just because it scares you. Luca's hands came up and framed her face. His thumbs traced along her cheekbones like he was memorizing every detail. Do you have any idea what you're choosing? Yes. A life where violence might erupt without warning, where enemies lurk in shadows, where every day is a calculated risk. She covered his hands with hers. But also a life where someone sees me as strong instead of weak, where loyalty means something, where I get to stand beside someone who makes me feel like I could set the world on fire and he'd hand me matches. That's not love. That's adrenaline and trauma bonding. Then why did I love you before tonight, before the gunfire and the explosions? Evelyn's voice cracked. I loved you when you taught me how to walk into rooms without apologizing, when you confessed about your brother, when you kissed me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. That wasn't trauma. That was real. Luca's eyes searched her face like he was looking for evidence she was lying. But whatever he found there made something in his expression break. I can't protect you from everything, he whispered. I don't need you to protect me. I need you to trust me enough to stand beside you anyway. And when my enemies come after you, when someone puts a gun to your head to get to me, then I'll handle it the same way I handled tonight. She leaned forward until their foreheads touched. You taught me how to survive in your world, so stop trying to send me back to one where I don't belong anymore. Luca's breath shuddered. Then his mouth found hers, and the kiss was desperate and gentle and absolutely certain all at once. Like he was making a promise he'd probably regret, but couldn't stop himself from offering anyway. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. If you die because of me, I won't. You don't know that. Neither do you. So stop deciding my future and let me choose it myself. Evelyn's hands tangled in his hair. I choose this. I choose you. Even knowing what it costs, especially knowing what it costs. Luca's arms wrapped around her waist and pulled her close enough that no space existed between them. He buried his face against her neck and held her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to earth. They stayed like that for a long time, until the adrenaline finally finished crashing and exhaustion took its place. Eventually, Luca stood and carried her to the bedroom, laid her down on sheets that smelled like laundry detergent and safety. He disappeared and returned with one of his shirts, helped her out of the torn midnight blue dress that had survived a firefight and betrayal and confessions whispered against burning vehicles. She pulled his shirt on. It hung to her knees. Luca stripped down to his boxer briefs and climbed into bed beside her, pulled her against his chest and held her like he was afraid she might disappear if he loosened his grip even slightly. Evelyn listened to his heartbeat and felt something settle deep in her chest. Not peace. Not yet, but the raw edge of possibility that maybe broken things could build something real together if they stopped pretending the damage didn't exist. What happens now? She whispered into the darkness. I don't know. Luca's voice was rough with exhaustion. Nothing about this follows any plan I've ever made. Good. Plans are overrated anyway. His chest moved with something that might have been laughter. Go to sleep, Evelyn. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her. Months. Morning came brutal and bright. Evelyn woke to sun streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. Her body ached in places she didn't know could ache. Her hands were stiff from scraped palms. Her wrists throbbed where Preston had grabbed her. but she was alive. She found Luca in the kitchen wearing jeans and nothing else, bruises painting his ribs purple and yellow. The gash across his forehead had been properly butterfly bandaged while she slept. He poured coffee into 2 mugs and slid one across the counter toward her. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Dante has a skull fracture, but he'll live." Dmitri disappeared back to whatever hole he crawled out of. The Belmont estate reported the shooting as a targeted attack by unknown assailants. "Police are investigating, but our cleanup crew made sure there's no evidence connecting us." Luca took a long drink of coffee. "Preston's engagement to Senator Whitmore's daughter was called off around 3 this morning. Apparently your speech made enough people question his character that the senator decided the political liability wasn't worth it." Evelyn's hands wrapped around the warm mug. "Good. You destroyed his entire future in under 5 minutes. He destroyed mine first." "Fair." Luca set his mug down and looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "I have something for you." He disappeared into the bedroom and returned carrying a small velvet box. Not the one with her grandmother's ring, something else. He set it on the counter between them. Evelyn stared at it like it might explode. "What is this?" "Open it." She opened the box with shaking hands. Inside sat a key on a simple metal ring. No labels, no explanation. "It's to this apartment," Luca said quietly. "It's yours if you want it. A place where you can disappear if my world becomes too much. Where you're safe, even when standing beside me feels dangerous." Evelyn's throat tightened. "You're giving me an escape route. I'm giving you a choice. Stay or go. Be part of this or walk away. But either way, you're not trapped." His eyes met hers. "I won't be the person who makes you feel like you can't leave." She closed the box and pushed it back across the counter toward him. "I don't want an escape route. Evelyn, I want your penthouse address. I want to know where you actually live when you're not hiding in safe houses. I want keys to the places that matter instead of the ones designed to keep me at a distance." She stood and walked around the counter until she was standing directly in front of him. "I told you last night. I'm not running. Not from you, not from this. So stop trying to give me exits and just let me stay." Luca stared at her like she'd just spoken a language he'd forgotten existed. "You're serious?" "Completely. You understand what that means? Being part of my life permanently? The danger, the violence, the enemies who'll come after you just to hurt me? Yes. And I understand that you've spent 10 years keeping everyone at a distance because your brother taught you that caring gets people killed." Evelyn's hand settled on his chest. "But I'm not your brother. I'm not weak. And I'm not going anywhere unless you physically throw me out." Something in Luca's expression cracked wide open. The walls he'd built from violence and survival instinct crumbled just enough that she could see the man beneath the monster. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Good thing I'm not asking you to deserve me. Just asking you to stop trying to protect me from my own decisions." Luca's arms wrapped around her waist and pulled her close. He pressed his forehead against hers and breathed like he was learning how all over again. "If we do this, if you actually stay, there are rules. I'm listening. You tell me when it becomes too much, when the violence or the danger or the weight of standing beside me gets too heavy. You don't just suffer in silence and pretend you're fine." Evelyn nodded. "Agreed. And you tell me the truth about your operations, about threats, about everything that could get me killed so I can make informed decisions instead of stumbling into danger blind." "Deal." Luca's hands framed her face. "And if at any point you decide this isn't what you want anymore, then I'll tell you." "But Luca," she held his gaze, "I'm not going to change my mind. I've spent 26 years being someone small and careful and safe, and it got me exactly nowhere. So I'd rather spend whatever time I have left being dangerous with you than safe and alone." "Even if it kills you?" "Everyone dies eventually. At least this way I'll die as someone I actually recognize in the mirror." Luca's laugh was broken and beautiful. Then he kissed her like she was oxygen and salvation, and the only good decision he'd ever made wrapped into one terrifying package. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. "I love you. I probably shouldn't. It definitely makes me weak, but I do." Evelyn's heart cracked open. "Say it again." "I love you, Evelyn Hart, and I'm going to spend whatever time we have making sure you never regret choosing this." "I already don't." They stood in the kitchen of a safe house apartment holding each other while morning light painted everything gold. Outside, the city woke up. Normal people heading to normal jobs, living normal lives that didn't involve Russian arms dealers or firefights at engagement parties. But inside, two broken people who'd learned how to build something real from violence and honesty held each other and made promises they'd probably pay for later, but couldn't stop themselves from offering anyway. Me. 3 months later, Evelyn stood in front of her second-grade classroom, writing spelling words on the whiteboard while 23 students copied them into notebooks. Outside, autumn painted the trees orange and gold. Inside, everything looked exactly like it had before Preston destroyed her life. Except it wasn't the same at all. She wore different clothes now, not expensive. Luca had learned she'd punch him if he tried to spend ridiculous money on her wardrobe, but well made. Clothes that fit properly and made her feel capable instead of apologetic. Her students had noticed the change too. The way she commanded the classroom now. The way she didn't flinch when parents challenged her. The way she looked people in the eye and made them look away first. Miss Hart was different than she'd been before summer break. Stronger. Less willing to accept disrespect disguised as concern. The principal had asked once if she was all right after everything with her canceled wedding. Evelyn had smiled and said she'd never been better. It wasn't a lie. The school day ended at 3:15. She packed her bag and walked to the parking lot where a familiar black Mercedes waited. Dante sat in the driver's seat, fully recovered from his skull fracture. He nodded when she climbed in. Boss says he's running late. Meeting with suppliers went long. That's fine. I need to stop by the market anyway. Dante drove her to the grocery store where she bought ingredients for dinner. Normal domestic tasks that felt surreal, given that she was shopping for a meal she'd cook in a penthouse owned by a man who'd killed 17 people. But that was her life now. Elementary school teacher by day, partner to a criminal kingpin by night. The duality should have broken her. Instead, it made her feel whole for the first time in her life. They arrived at the penthouse at 5. Evelyn cooked pasta while Dante sat at the kitchen island reviewing security reports on a tablet. They'd developed an easy rhythm over the past 3 months. He didn't talk much. She respected that. But he'd started trusting her enough to let his guard down occasionally. How's the physical therapy? She asked while stirring sauce. Painful. Necessary. Dante's expression stayed flat, but his voice carried a hint of dark humor. Doctor says I'm healing faster than expected. Probably because I'm too stubborn to stay broken. Sounds familiar. Boss taught me well. The penthouse door opened at 6:30. Luca walked in looking exhausted. His suit jacket was gone. His tie hung loose, but his eyes lit up the second he saw Evelyn. You cooked. I live here now? Of course I cooked. She pointed at the cabinet. Set the table. Dinner's almost ready. Luca obeyed without argument. Dante excused himself quietly and disappeared to wherever he lived when not driving them around or preventing assassinations. They ate at the dining table overlooking the harbor. Luca told her about his day, carefully edited to remove details that would implicate her if anyone ever investigated. She told him about her student's latest spelling test disaster and the parent who'd tried to argue their child deserved an A despite failing to turn in any homework. Normal conversation, domestic routine, the kind of life neither of them expected to build together. After dinner, they stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows watching the city lights reflect off dark water. Luca's arms wrapped around her waist from behind. His chin rested on her shoulder. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. Regret what? All of this. Choosing violence over safety, staying with someone who brings danger everywhere he goes. Evelyn turned in his arms to face him. Do you regret teaching me how to be dangerous? Never. Then stop asking if I regret the consequences. She traced the scar through his eyebrow with her thumb. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Luca's eyes searched her face like he still couldn't believe she was real. I never thought I'd have this. Something normal mixed with the chaos. It's not normal. It's better. Because we built it ourselves from pieces nobody else wanted. Evelyn's hand settled against his chest. You gave me back my spine. I gave you a reason to want something beyond survival. That's not normal. That's extraordinary. Extraordinarily insane. Same thing. Luca laughed and the sound was lighter than she'd heard in months. He kissed her slow and deep and certain. like he'd finally stopped waiting for everything to fall apart. When he pulled back, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Not the key to the safe house. Something else. Evelyn's breath caught. Lucas. It's not what you think. He opened the box. Inside sat her grandmother's engagement ring, the one she'd offered him 9 months ago as payment for 4 hours of fake affection. I want you to have this back. Not because we're ending anything. Because it belongs to you. It's part of your history. And you shouldn't have to give up pieces of yourself to stand beside me. Tears burned behind Evelyn's eyes. I offered this to you. I know. And I'm giving it back because you don't owe me anything. Not payment. Not gratitude. Not pieces of your past. His voice was rough with emotion. You chose to stay. That's worth more than any ring. She took the box with shaking hands and stared at the small diamond that had belonged to her grandmother. The woman who'd told her once that real love wasn't about grand gestures. It was about someone seeing all your broken parts and choosing to stay anyway. Thank you, she whispered. There's something else. Luca reached into his other pocket and pulled out a second box. This one was different, sleeker, more expensive. He opened it to reveal a white gold band set with small diamonds that caught the city lights. Simple, elegant, nothing ostentatious. I'm not asking you to marry me, he said carefully, because that feels like pressure and timelines and societal expectations neither of us care about. But I'm asking if you'd wear this, as a symbol that you're mine and I'm yours, that we chose this deliberately instead of stumbling into it. Evelyn stared at the ring through tears that finally spilled over. That's the worst non-proposal I've ever heard. I know, I'm terrible at this. It's perfect. She held out her left hand. Put it on. Luca slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. It fit perfectly. Like he'd somehow known her size despite never measuring. They stood at the window, holding each other while the city stretched beneath them, dangerous and corrupt and beautiful. Luca Devereaux remained king of the underworld, but there was light inside his empire now, laughter in the penthouse, someone who saw his darkness and chose to stand in it anyway. And Evelyn Hart, once abandoned and humiliated, no longer needed revenge or validation from people who'd never valued her, because she'd become something far more powerful than the woman who begged for acceptance. She'd become someone who demanded respect, who walked into rooms without apologizing, who stood beside monsters without fear because she'd learned how to be dangerous herself. Not despite the broken pieces, because of them. Bonk. 6 months after that, on a random Tuesday that meant nothing to anyone else, Luca asked her to marry him properly. No grand gestures, no public declarations, just the two of them in the warehouse where it all started, standing in the boxing ring where he'd first taught her how to survive. She said yes before he finished the question. They got married at City Hall 3 weeks later with Dante as their only witness. No reception, no guests, no 300 people watching and judging. Just two people who'd built something real from violence and honesty, promising to keep building it together until death or betrayal took them first. The rings they exchanged were simple gold bands. No diamonds, no engravings, just metal and promises, and the absolute certainty that whatever came next, they'd face it the same way they'd faced everything else. Together. Dangerous. Unbreakable. And when Evelyn Hart became Evelyn Devereaux, she didn't lose herself in someone else's shadow. She just added another layer to the woman she'd fought so hard to become. The elementary school teacher who graded spelling tests and helped second graders learn to read. The partner who stood beside criminals and called it Tuesday. The woman who'd walked into a mafia lounge in a wet dress with nothing but shattered pride and built an empire from the pieces nobody else wanted. Preston Calloway saw the wedding announcement in the paper 6 months later. By then, he was working a mid-level consulting job in a different city, his political ambitions destroyed by Senator Whitmore's very public withdrawal of support. He stared at Evelyn's name beside Luca Devereaux's and felt something that might have been regret. Not for leaving her at the altar. He'd convinced himself that was justified, but for underestimating what she'd become when he stopped controlling who she was allowed to be. The woman in the photograph looked nothing like the timid teacher he'd discarded. She looked dangerous, powerful, like she could burn the world down and dance in the ashes without flinching. And beside her stood the monster everyone warned her about, looking at her like she was the only thing in the universe worth protecting. Preston threw the newspaper in the trash and tried to forget. But Evelyn's face stayed with him for years. A reminder that some people don't break when you destroy them. They just become something you wish you'd never underestimated. Years later, when people asked Evelyn how she'd survived being married to Luca Devereaux, how she'd lasted in a world built from violence and fear, she'd smile and tell them the truth. I stopped apologizing for being exactly who I am. Stopped trying to be someone small enough that powerful people wouldn't feel threatened. And I found someone who taught me that being dangerous isn't about hurting people. It's about making sure nobody can hurt you first. And when they'd ask if she regretted any of it, the danger, the violence, the absolute chaos, she'd think about the warehouse where Luca first taught her to walk like she owned the room. The engagement party, where she burned down everything Preston tried to build. The penthouse, where she'd learned that love didn't mean becoming someone else. It meant finding someone who saw all your broken pieces and chose them anyway. Then she'd smile and say, "Not for a second." Because Evelyn Devereaux had learned something invaluable standing beside a monster for all those years. That survival wasn't about being perfect. It was about being willing to fight for the life you wanted instead of accepting the one other people thought you deserved. And she'd been fighting ever since that rainy night when she walked into Obsidian Lounge and offered a criminal her grandmother's ring in exchange for 4 hours of fake affection. What she got instead was a lifetime of real partnership with someone who made her dangerous enough to survive anything, even herself.